All right, I think we're good to go. Every time you think you do everything right, and then there's always some sort of technical thing. Welcome, everyone. Whether you're watching on Twitch, YouTube, or Facebook, we are excited to have you here today for LGBT Voices in Gaming Part 2. It's part 2 because we had an amazing conversation last week. Hopefully you joined us for that. We had a lot of fun with an amazing group of guests. You see I'm joined by 4 other amazing familiar faces. If you watched last week, we'll have an additional person who will be joining us momentarily. But before we get to these amazing people, let's check out some of the upcoming events we have, as well as some of the events we've recently had. My name is Michael Zhitkov. I'll be your host. I'm also the founder and executive director of Potions and Pixels nonprofit based out of beautiful Charlotte, North Carolina, where we're broadcasting from. I invite you all to definitely check out our website. You can see all the work we do, from workforce development projects to game development, community engagement, educational programs for the youth. You name it, if it involves games, we're probably involved in it. So we're really excited to have you here with us today. So if you are here and you enjoy these types of community conversations, let's check out some of the events that we have had in the past here. So our first conversation was Black Voices in Gaming in August. This is still available on our Facebook and YouTube channel. So if you missed this, you can still find it right now. As well as Women in Gaming, which involved the amazing folks at the Athena Alliance. All these organizations, if you're not following them, make sure to take a moment to do so for sure. Following that was Custom Game Controllers, where we explored the art, technology, and people making custom game controllers in our community. So definitely check that conversation. All of these, you'll notice, are sponsored by our good friends at Lowe's. This conversation was also sponsored by our friends at Red Bull, so we really appreciate all of their support. Hey, Wiz Khalifa 212, thanks so much for following. Really appreciate that. The next conversation we had was Games to the Rescue, where we explored how games are being used to fight coronavirus. Yes, we should all be socially distancing and wearing masks, but in addition to that, you can also fight coronavirus by playing Eterna and Fold It. So join us for that conversation. Oh, and I see we are joined by our 6th guest. Thanks, Zach, for joining us. Excited to bring you in here in a minute. We started September off with Black Voices in Esports, which again you can find on our Facebook and YouTube pages. And then the last 3 weeks, or the last 2 weeks, I should say, have been dedicated to LGBT voices in gaming. 2 weeks ago, we played the first chapter of Tell Me Why live on stream. And then last week, we had the first part of our conversation where we explored LGBT representation in the game industry, as well as a discussion of chapters 1 of Tell Me Why. Today, we are back at you with an exploration of chapters 2 and 3. And if you aren't familiar with the game, we'll go into that in more detail. Totally still would like you to participate in the conversation, but these are the final 2 chapters. The whole game is 3 chapters long. We're excited to be announcing all of our upcoming events for October, including Hispanic Voices in Gaming coming up on October 13th with game designer Julio Nazario, who is who's based out of North Carolina. So we're excited to talk to him about the amazing games he has been creating. Indie Game Club, of course, is every Monday and Thursday. We're doing it a little differently this week, I should say. Instead of streaming on Monday, we decided we're going to do some daytime streaming just to switch it up and see how people like that. So we'll be streaming some indie games tomorrow and then discussing them on our usual Thursday schedule. Outside of discussing games, of course, we love playing them, so if you want to join up with us in our welcoming community, as well as the communities of the organizations represented here today, make sure to jump on all those Discords. We do games practically every day, but our big game nights are Wednesdays and Saturdays. We play board games and video games those nights. On Wednesdays, we also have our Smash and Learn sessions. This upcoming one is for Bowser. So if you want to level up your Smash Brothers skills, learn about different characters and techniques, this is the league for you. It is completely free and designed with all skill levels in mind. On Friday, we traditionally have our King of the Ring session. We've recently been switching up with Queen of the Ring and Team of the Ring, and then this one is Dark Lord of the Ring. So you know Sensei Winter Soul is coming at you with a lot of different events, so jump on that. This Saturday, we also have our upcoming gold tier tournament. So if you are a gold tier player, and you can check the bracket website that we have to see where you currently rank, you can enter that tournament. We also want to congratulate all of our silver tier and bronze tier players. You can see in the silver tier tournament we just had, congratulations to all those who participated, but especially first place Carbon Copies, second place K-Stand, and third place Ultimate Forsaken. For the bronze tier tournament, we want to congratulate first place Scion, second place Waj 123, and third place My Drum Luck 87. So congratulations to everyone who participated throughout. But of course, you all are here today to join us for LGBT Voices in Gaming Part 2. So I'm going to bring it back here to this amazing panel that we have. Can I get away from the panel to the audience? Awesome. So all of these are familiar faces. Unfortunately, Chris from PvP Hub wasn't able to join us today because of a scheduling conflict, but we definitely want to give a shout out to not only to PvP Hub Charlotte, but the Athena Alliance. If you are not familiar with either organization, make sure to check them out. Their information is in the event description. Make sure to like, follow, subscribe, all that good stuff. Let's take it to this panel. Let's start off with an introduction with the founders of the Charlotte Gaymers Network. Johnny Barrio, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hey there, everybody. My name is Johnny Barrio. I'm one of the co-founders of the Charlotte Gamers Network. We are the largest gaming community based here in Charlotte, North Carolina, specifically geared to the LGBTQ community and its allies. I wanted to say again, thank you, Mike, for having us yet again on this show, and we're really, really excited for tonight's conversation.
Excited to have you all. Thanks so much. And again, just as another shout out to Johnny, we had discussed this early on. He was a guest on the first episode of Indie Game Club, and we had talked about potentially doing this program. So I'm glad it's not only come to life and people can hear about all the amazing works your organizations are involved in, but also that we get to talk through the whole game. It's a lot of fun. So I appreciate that very much. Awesome. Zach Smith, we appreciate you sliding right in here and joining the conversation. You got some big news. You want to share it with the public?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, my name's Zach Smith, co-founder of CGN with Johnny here. Wasn't sure if I was going to be able to make it. My sister just had her baby today. And since we, with COVID, no one's allowed to visit her in the hospital. So we did a big Zoom family chat today. Wasn't sure I was going to be able to make it, but we made it just in time. So happy to be here, and we're really excited to keep talking about the games we're talking about today.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Zach. We appreciate it, and congratulations. That's fantastic.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Next, we have Nicole. Nicole, can you introduce yourself to the world, please?
Hey guys, happy to be back again. I've only been a part of CG in a short time, but even with the short time, it's like a familiar friend. Like, they've been, so great to me. Everybody's been like, I feel like I've known them for years. So I'm a college student, working at Target for 6 years now. That's pretty much it. That's all I got.
And you're a gamer that's got expertise on this stuff. We appreciate it so much, for sure. And you know what? I forgot what we should do. We had, when we introduced ourselves in the last show, we also talked about our pronouns as well and gave a little background. So maybe we might reverse real quick and do that. So I'll say my pronouns are he, him. I'm a cis straight male. Johnny, do you mind circling back on that?
No, I totally forgot that we did that last time. Hey guys, again, Johnny. I'm a cis gay man, and my pronouns are he, him, and his.
Thanks, Johnny. Zach?
Hey, cis gay man, he and his as well.
Thanks, Zach. Nicole?
I am bisexual, and I go by she, her.
I appreciate that. And also, I think it helps for just our audience to kind of know the perspectives that we're coming from. So we really appreciate that. Jenny, can you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Hi, I'm Jenny James Gunn. My pronouns are she and they. I am a pansexual trans woman, gender nonconforming. I don't work in the gaming world per se, even though I am part of the Gamers Network. How I got tied into this is with Johnny Barrio. We've done a lot of LGBT activism and political work in the community of Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm also affiliated with Charlotte Pride, and I'm a coordinator for their actually Transgender Pride and the Real Out Film Festival. So I go on various shows and talk a lot about pop culture, activism, things of that nature. I just left my two current shows, resigned over the weekend because I have to pivot to some new shows in development coming up probably in November, December. But I'm very active in a lot of intersections of Charlotte community and activism, and am honored to be on this panel with everybody and excited to learn about the gaming world and how it ties in with my world. So
thanks for having me.
You have some news as well with your recent re-election.
Yeah, I was
re-elected.
I was the first trans woman to ever be elected to the board of directors for the National Organization of Women Charlotte, and their almost 50-year history. And then this year, or just about a month ago, I got re-elected to the board. So this will be my second term, and I'm very honored. It is the oldest feminist group, national feminist group in North America. Is actually the founding roots go back to President Johnson in the 1960s. And I'm very proud to be a part of North Carolina Now history and Charlotte Now history. So they honor me by bringing me back.
That is awesome.
I don't know why. I'm kind of a kook, but they do keep bringing me back. So they're a glutton for punishment. But I am honored to serve both the board of Now, which is a very amazing organization and does a lot for all of Charlotte. And with Charlotte Pride, I'm always enthusiastic about that and all the programming they do year round.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations. Let's clap it up for that.
And could I say one more thing?
Yes, please. Absolutely.
Some of the subject matter, and I know there's going to be probably a lot of young people that are going to watch this tonight. Be mindful of the impact that it's going to have. There is this game does have some violence, does have some mature subjects that if it becomes too much, there's no dishonor in popping off the program for a little while and coming back to it. And also, if you ever have any suicidal thoughts or any suicidal ideation, I encourage people to reach out. There's a lot of different 800 numbers, and I'm a big fan of therapy. It does you a world of good, and I wanted to get this up front. I've gone through 2 different bouts of therapy, one for anger management in my 20s and one for my gender transition the last few years. And I think everybody that is hurting should take their mental health serious.
Absolutely. Yeah, we appreciate you saying that. And we should say that in the last episode, Keelan mentioned how at the very end of the game, you have a suicide prevention hotline number. We included that as well with a rotating set of images of major decisions in the game. So that will be included on screen soon. So yeah, we appreciate that, Jenny, very much. Finally, last but certainly not least, you remember him from bringing that next level enthusiasm in the last episode. He had to restrain himself a bit in the last episode because he had played all 3 chapters before we did, so we had to close our ears a bit for any sort of spoilers. But today is your day, Keelan, and now we can discuss the whole thing. Keelan, can you introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Hello, my name is Keelan McNeil. I am a full-time, part-time worker for Food Lion. And yes, I am an avid gamer. I saw this game immediately and had timers set on when the next chapter would come out so that I could finish it because I am not one for cliffhangers. So I immediately went on to the next game, loved every second of it, cried every second of it. It was amazing. And I'm so ready to be like, oh, no more spoiler alerts. It is time to squeal. But yes, I am very enthusiastic about this game. I joined CGN a little while ago when it was when there were about 30 members. Now there's like 120 roughly. I haven't been keeping count as much anymore because it's just a lot of people. But yeah. As soon as this game really started picking up speed and started picking up feedback, like I was one of the first ones to pre-install it the moment the trailer went out.
Nice.
So now I am just ready to speak. You will get tired of hearing my voice.
We will not, and we are going to be super excited to dive right in. Real quick, before we do a recap of Chapter 1, I do want to, again, to what Keelan just said and what everybody just said, remind everybody to like, follow, subscribe, all that good stuff to all the organizations involved in this event. So check out Charlotte Gaymers Network for sure. Athena Alliance, PvP Hub Charlotte, and of course we'd appreciate some love for Potions and Pixels, so check all those wonderful organizations out. Do it now. Make sure while you're having this conversation, open up a second tab, open up a second window. These are all awesome groups that you definitely want to participate with. Let's clap it up for all of our amazing guests. Let's show them that welcome that we love to do. All right, folks, we have a lot to cover. I'm going to try to kind of get that next level Keelan energy in here because I was blown away with chapters 2 and 3. But for those who are watching, let's give you a quick recap of chapter 1. I'm going to show the trailer and then Keelan's going to describe a bit what happened in chapter 1. So this is chapter 1 of Tell Me Why.
Whoa, I just got hit with a flood of memories.
Love you, Mom.
You seeing what I'm seeing?
Mom?
Alyson?
Yeah. It doesn't matter that they don't believe us.
We all believed that what happened that night was self-defense. But we couldn't be sure.
It doesn't matter that they kept us apart.
Brother, sister, we look out for each other.
It doesn't matter that finding the truth feels impossible.
We're all done with fairy tales.
The only thing that matters is you're my brother. And the only way to move forward is to keep looking back.
We've been getting these visions whenever we see or hear something really emotional. Everything we thought we knew about Marianne just got thrown out the window.
She loved you. She attacked you. We both saw it.
I thought coming here would be closing a chapter of our lives.
Nothing good comes from stirring up old memories.
We don't really have a choice about that.
There's always a choice, son.
I can't do this. Stop!
So that was the trailer for Tell Me Why Chapter 1. Again, we discussed that last week. For all of those who are watching and participating in the chat, we will say this, and we'll probably have to say it again, but this is definitely a big spoiler alert. Can we all yell that one more time to everybody? Spoiler alert! We are going to be talking spoilers, but that's the fun part of this conversation. We are going to dig in deep, and we should say we're also going to try to keep the conversation chronological, although we may have to jump around a bit. But let's do a recap of Chapter 1. Keelan, do you mind letting the audience know what happened in Chapter 1?
I don't mind at all. Excuse me. So, you start off in Chapter 1 as Alyson, and you find out a lot about the two twins, who are Alyson and Tyler. And Tyler is a twin of Alyson, who had transitioned into a trans male while they had been separated for 10 years. Why were they separated in 10 years? Well, you get a nice little scene at the beginning saying, with young Tyler saying, I killed my mother, in which case he gets transported to Fireweed Juvenile Detention Center. Which is hours away, I assume, because you have to take a ferry. But basically, in Chapter 1, you meet the Ronan twins. You discover exactly who they are right from the beginning, their relationship to each other, and you find out that everyone knows who Tyler is because Alyson won't stop talking about him. and you really go through the story of a lot of exposition and a lot of story building, and then you get to a super giant plot twist. I'm allowed to say the plot twist now.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
okay.
I think we had two big twists in chapter 1. Hit us with those for sure.
Two big twists. I always remember the first one. You might have to remind me on the second one, but the first one I always remember is when you go into the flashback. Once they start remembering things, because they have this twin bond they call the voice, that they use to communicate to each other when they're not speaking. They also can remember things together. So you get to the big twist once a flashback hits of a young Tyler running away from his mother, back when he was still called Ollie. Running away from his mother, who is holding a shotgun. Yes, it's one of those kind of stories. And you eventually get to young Tyler kneeling at his mother's footsteps, with the mother pointing the shotgun at Tyler. Tyler calls for Alyson, who's young, who cut his hair with scissors, which is what started the whole thing. Sorry, I'm not in any chronological order at this point.
No, this is good. This is good. I'm like sitting here like, and what happens next? This is a good recap.
So you get to this flashback, and you see Alyson cutting Tyler's hair with scissors. Tyler goes to show his mom. Young Tyler runs away from his mom, who's carrying a shotgun, and following him to the pier. Young Tyler is on his knees, basically crying, I would assume. Otherwise, it might be the rain. I don't know. Looking up, saying, "Please don't." And the mother saying, "I'm going to kill you." And then young Tyler calls for Alyson, who shows up and stabs her mother in the back with the scissors that she used to cut Tyler's hair, which is beautiful dramatic irony, in my opinion. And then the mother, named Marianne, falls into the lake in first chapter. That's the big twist. And then I never remember.
Ooh, I got the second one.
You got the second one? Do it.
Nicole?
Okay.
I feel like a teacher here.
So towards the beginning, you think that Tyler and Alyson's mother went after Tyler because of him transitioning. But when, they go back to the house, as I'm guessing they're adults. Anyway, when they're at the house, and they're able to go into the mother's room, they find a book basically about like accepting and like, living with your trans child. So then basically your whole thought of their mother changes, because you're like, wait, she actually like wanted to accept Tyler and like try to figure out how to be a good mother and help him with his transition. So that makes you think, kind of change your feelings about her.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you guys did a fantastic recap with that. And, it is one of those moments, like you said, Keelan, with it being such a cliffhanger that it's hard. It was hard for me, definitely, to restrain myself from playing chapter 2 and 3 immediately. When I did play chapter 2, I played 3 right back to back because it had a similar feeling to that. Does anybody else, Johnny, Zach, Jenny, do you guys want to say anything else about chapter 1 before we go into chapter 2? I mean, there was a lot of things we discussed in the previous episode where I think for the most part, we all were hoping that Mary Ann wasn't truly intending to kill Tyler. We have some definitive answers on that now. We had some questions as far as the conflicting memory situation. As Keelan said, they have this kind of voice that they can communicate between each other. So there's a lot of things that we were not really certain of. And what this game does really well is it makes you kind of revise your thoughts and relook at prior memories based on the newest information we have. Do you all have any other thoughts about chapter 1 that now that you've concluded the game before we jump into chapter 2?
I was wrong about everything. Yeah, they do a really good job of, I guess, unreliable narrator would be the best way to put it.
Yeah.
But they do a really, really good job of making you think you know what's going on. And then, like you said, they sort of throw a wrench into your thought process with some new information. So definitely see chapter 1 with a different lens than I do now, for sure.
Yeah. And I think that was part of the masterful kind of design. I think they knew that that's kind of the experience they wanted the players to have.
Right.
I think
remember that. Oh, sorry. That takes me back to that comment that I made of like, things you think just you wait. Keelan knows what I'm talking about. Sorry, Jenny.
Oh no, no worries. I think one nice thing with chapter 1 is they really developed the characters really well, and really showed the angst between and resentment between the two siblings. One that grew up in basically an institution, but an institution that became very fond to the trans character, Tyler, and really probably shaped his entire life in a good way, and separated him from the town that led to his mom's demise. And then the sister, the sibling that had to wallow in, all the rumors and all that, and seeing that conflict play out in their interpersonal relationship with Eddie and all the other side characters, and how differently they looked at life, which I do think affected their visions because of the angst that went on in those 10 years.
Absolutely.
I think it was a phenomenal job of narratives.
Yeah, and I think the delivery of this kind of episodic structure of delivering each episode kind of once a week, right, over the course of, I guess, 2 weeks total, allowed you to kind of keep up with the experience and revise your thoughts as you played it. I love this. I hope we see more games delivered in this fashion. That's just me here. Any last thoughts on this before we dive right into Chapter 2? Okay, cool. So the trailer for Chapter 2 is a lot shorter, but we want to make sure you all see that as well. So let me pull that up here. And so this is the trailer for Chapter 2.
Now, more than ever, we need answers. About the night our mother died.
Now, what if I don't want to know the truth?
But we don't agree. Who to trust?
I'm not a cruel person.
We need the truth.
I can't go through that again.
We have to take that chance. And we need each other.
To me.
Now, more than
All right,
ever,
that was the trailer
we need
for
answers.
Chapter 2. All right, folks, real quick shout out to Scorpion Zero. Thanks for following and your comment. That you're glad to see more LGBT voices in gaming. Heart emoji, appreciate that so much. Shuma Gosnix, thank you as well for following. Really appreciate that. All right, guys, I feel like now we can finally dive right into this. Chapter 2. What's going on here? How did you feel? A lot to unpack. Let's dive straight in. Anybody, who wants to do this?
So I think the first thing for me, and something we actually didn't talk about last week,
about the night
was
our mother died.
I don't know where this trend started. I think it was from the first Borderlands, but I so love how soundtracks make a game, and the way that the music that they pick, and I'm really big into indie alt rock and all that kind of stuff. So this stuff was singing to me. I mean, just the music was incredible. The soundtrack was probably one of the best I've heard. I mean, this isn't new for us. This is something that DONTNOD has really perfected with the Life is Strange series.
Our mother
but it's weird because it's like I try to think back, and it's like Borderlands had that. I mean, everybody remembers that trailer with There's No Rest for the Wicked.
We have to take that chance.
And that opening with the Vance hitting that creature. I mean, it's one of the most iconic gaming trailers I think we've seen in the new generation. But outside of that, the only place you really ever see that is the Telltale series. Every single Telltale series starts with like that really iconic song that just gets motivated. And I really wasn't expecting it here, and they just like blew me away. From the first episode, I was like, okay, that's cool. It just the song's kind of catchy, whatever. But the second chapter and then the third chapter song completely just like it really sets the tone for the entire chapter. And I don't know if anybody, if y'all picked up on it, but if you listen to the lyrics too, and it really influenced the way I played the game, because even by listening to lyrics, it became really apparent to me very quickly that this game was going to be a game all about reconciliation.
Who to trust?
And it's right there in the lyrics of those two songs, and talking about that, those parts in the episode. So I wanted to start off by just saying kudos to DONTNOD for, again, just masterfully selecting a soundtrack.
Johnny, I did a quick gasp there when you said it, because this was my top note. Literally the top note I'm looking at, the first thing I wanted to say about Chapter 2 was the exact same thing. And yes, spot on with I literally have Borderlands written right here. I have specifically Tales from Borderlands with each of the episodes. But that, like you said, with that second chapter, having that scene where they were showing the transition, but the scenes were transitioning back and forth between them as children and adults with the music in the background. So powerful stuff. Great way to start chapter 2 for sure.
Now,
hey, Michael, can I just point out, I think people are not able to hear us speak very well on the stream.
About the night our mother died.
Oh no, I am so sorry, folks. Johnny, I hope that didn't get in the way of what you were saying there. My apologies. I changed some of our settings here so it wouldn't be loud in my ear, but I didn't turn off the stuff there. My fault, Johnny. Just a quick recap there. You were saying how powerful the music was. I think people probably still could make out the core point there, but that each chapter kind of begins with its own kind of unique musical scene.
Yeah, sure. I mean, again, it's something that you don't really see all that often in gaming, and it really does suck because, I mean, just melding that perfect song together with a game, I mean, it just really builds that emotion. It really sets the tone for the game. And not only that, for consumers like me, and I'm sure like everybody else on this call, who really love that sort of sound and that music. Again, talking about Borderlands, I'm sure everybody on this stream remembers the first Borderlands trailer 10 years ago. Doing that whole 1.5 minute trailer to Ain't No Rest for the Wicked. And I mean, it's still something that I can remember shot by shot of that trailer to this day. And it's the same thing with this episode. I mean, that's going to be that sequence is going to be something I'm going to remember for a long time. Absolutely.
And so after we have that scene at the beginning kind of showing the siblings kind of reconnecting, their relationship, kind of reflecting on their childhood and just embracing finally being with each other after 10 years apart, where does the story go from here? Because this episode certainly has its kind of certainly has some big twists and certain things that we go deeper into. Does anybody want to jump into that? I can also show some of the key decisions from chapter 2 if that helps as well.
Yeah, I think for me the first big twist, or I guess plot moment, I believe in chapter 2 is that you find out that Tessa called child services on the mother. Do they have that memory with Eddie coming to her to tell her? Is that right before they go to the police station? That's right.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, because that's why they decide to confront him.
Yeah, because I think that's the first big decision you have to make is deciding whose memory you believe first.
That's right.
I'm pretty sure I chose Tyler's. I kind of always sided with Tyler for the most part. Yeah, I definitely chose Tyler's memory. And I think for me, it kind of seemed like the right choice, I think, because she definitely was becoming unglued after she got that information, which I think, we find out why that hit her as hard as it did, even more so, in chapter 3. So then after, like you guys said, you go to confront Eddie, and then that's where you find out that Tessa had called child services, and that was what Eddie was trying to tell her when he had come to the house. Can I just say I hated Tessa by the end of this game? I definitely did not forgive her at the graveyard. I was like, I think I chose the option. It was like, you need to realize you destroyed my family or something like that. I was feeling vindictive. What did you guys pick for that one?
I forgave her.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, please. Go for it, Nicole.
So I, throughout the whole game, I tried to do, cause as, not cause a lot of problems. I didn't want to, have issues with, I didn't want it to affect, Alyson and Tessa's relationship because she technically works for them. So I tried to pick, the more positive choices, even though, I agree with everybody. I hated Tessa. But yeah, I ended up was it forgiving her or just I didn't fight with her.
I'm gonna say this is gonna be really, really funny coming out of my mouth, but me saying it's being funny is probably not going to be funny. Anyway, I am the youngest one here, if you can't tell already. I am major Gen Z. Gen Zs don't like causing trouble. We are very non-confrontational people. So the moment that you got the choice to forgive both Eddie and Tessa, I think I remember forgiving Eddie. When I talked to Tessa, I think there was like an option where it's just like, I'm like Tyler said, I'm tired of losing people. And that was the
Can you
really
provide a little
thing.
bit more context in terms of the forgiveness
Okay.
factor? Like, just so people understand what we mean with Eddie, who is the police chief, who we should also say has acted as Alyson's kind of father figure. She calls him uncle after the death of her mother. He raised her, and we find out. We do find out in chapter 2. Chapter 2 is when they go into the police headquarters, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's before, so it's before the graveyard, before any of this takes place, where you find out that Chief Brown, who Tyler has hated for this whole time, has been paying his whole way through Final Weed and all of this, and he really realizes like, oh shit, this guy has really tried to keep our family together and closer.
Yeah, that was definitely a big point that I like to think, like, if there was someone to hate, for me it was Chief Brown until that moment. Because I'm a very tentative person around any kind of authority figure who likes to impose where they're not supposed to. So when it came to Chief Brown's whole Judgment Day, is how I'll say it, I was very slow to react on it. But then once we'd figure out all that stuff, question, I'm jumping for a second, and I feel like I am. When you start like getting sneaky and jumping through things, is that chapter 2 or chapter 3?
2.
2? Cool. Okay, so the big thing to notice is when you find everything out, what ends up happening is you, as Tyler and Alyson, sneak into the police headquarters. And when I say sneak in, like you oh god, I can't speak right now. You sneak into the case files place. Yeah. Fun fact, I loved the little puzzle mini game where Alyson has the little thought of the da da dee dum. I thought that was super duper cute. And if you noticed a little bit, I'll probably be helping someone solve a puzzle here. I'm sorry. Some of these buttons are worn out, so I knew immediately, okay, these numbers are not it. So I solved that puzzle like that. It was very, very easy. Once I figured out what numbers did what sound, that was the easiest puzzle I could have done the entire time. I had a harder time finding the case files. But as you go through the computer and you go through the case files and you find out that Tessa called Child Services, that someone had been to the hospital. I don't exactly remember chapter 2 as well as I thought.
Yeah, it's a pretty tense situation where Alyson is kind of stalling Eddie, Chief Brown, while you, as Tyler in this situation, are exploring the archives, trying to rapidly piece this information together. And we should say that the siblings are doing this because they want answers now. You talk to Officer Greggs and Chief Brown, and you realize that, yes, technically these records are public, but you have to do an application for them. And so they take a bit advantage of their familial connection, right? And then they explore. And I think there's a lot of like truth bombs that are hit. I thought that scene was pretty hard hitting because not only was like, oh damn, my decisions are permanent in this game, so I want to make sure that I'm getting as much information as I can, doing it as quickly as I can, and trying to piece together what I can. So, Nicole, hit us with that knowledge.
Sorry, I keep talking over everybody.
No, please.
But so when you're going through those files, that's where you kind of hit the big, I don't know, Keelan, you were about to get to this, but you get to the point of you realize Marianne didn't die the way that we all thought.
Yes. Yeah. So can you reveal?
Drowned, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like, I think what Alyson, when she had stabbed her with the scissors, it was like a very light, it was kind of like a flesh wound. but it ended up being that she had drowned. So it kind of makes you like, again, it's one of those things where you're like, this is not what I thought at all. Like, now I have to rethink everything.
For sure.
100% for sure. Side note, and I'm probably going to get like a no on this question, but is there any way to go through that and not get caught? Because I did.
I got caught too.
I think I definitely got caught. I'm just wondering if there would be a way to not.
Did you get caught in the going in the archive room?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, you have to, because it progresses on to where Brown comes in and catches you. Yeah.
I figured they wanted us to have that interaction with him, with Eddie. So.
And so you get the option to either keep escalating things before they go in his office, or you can sort of de-escalate right there. Did anyone escalate it further? I think the option's like, don't touch me. Or there's like a, yeah, you're right, we're family, let's talk about it. I did choose the we're family option. Did anyone else
I
choose
believe
the
that's
other
what
one?
I did as well.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah. And then I did end up forgiving him in the office as well. Did anyone not?
I didn't, but that wasn't my intention, I should say. That was kind of one of those things where like the choice immediately rolled into like not forgiving, and that's not what I was necessarily going for there, if I'm not mistaken. Jenny, I know you wanted to jump in here. What are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, I really think Chapter 2's theme was really about conflict and uncovering almost like the town gaslighting of Marianne and Marianne's death. I mean, you know, like a typical small town, especially in the South. I mean, even though that's in Alaska, it has that kind of that same feel that we don't talk about certain things. We cover up certain things. We all... And they don't always know the truth, you know. So there's so many layers and there's so many truths and versions of the truth in Chapter 2 that, you know, we'll talk about in Chapter 3. But it is interesting. The further you go along, the more sympathetic you are to individual characters like Eddie.
Yeah.
That did the best he did with the information he was presented at the time. You know, he made decisions based on what he knew was the truth, and being a law and order type guy, kind of by the book guy, that's kind of how he reacted to the kids. If you think about it, it's one of the reasons he kept Tyler and Alyson separate for so many years, is he viewed Tyler as a killer, a stone cold killer that we find out isn't necessarily the truth, you know. And so there's, you know, same way with Tessa being a friend of Marianne's. Was she really a friend, or was she more predatory? Was she more of a bully, you know? And so there's so many truths that come out in Chapter 2, and so many conflicts that led to ultimately Marianne's death, because Marianne was treated like a kook, an outsider, a weirdo. And again, we'll find out later on some more truths about that. But I think you just see a town that basically kind of bullied Marianne to death in a lot of ways.
Can we talk a bit about Eddie in more detail here? Because Jenny, I totally feel you on that point, and Keelan, I think you just momentarily said this as well, that this, not only having that key bit of information, knowing that Eddie was trying to look out for Tyler in some way by paying for his fireweed tuition, but also in Chapter 2 is where we get that moment where I believe it's a choice, I think I have it listed up here as well, where Alyson gets to decide whether to tell Eddie what truly happened that night from her perspective. Can we break that down and break down Eddie's response and how that all changes how we look at this character versus how we looked at him in Chapter 1?
So I think... Oh, sorry, Jenny, go ahead.
I think the discovery that Tyler had, that he found out that Eddie sprung for all the fireweed, services and all that, I think really flipped Tyler end on end. I think it affected him very deeply, because here's a guy that he had so much angst and resentment against, and dealing with issues with my dad, that really hit home for me. And how I view my dad now, and how I viewed him throughout my younger life, and this a little switch of narrative and a little bit of understanding from both sides, how it really changed our relationship. I could really feel how Tyler began to really embrace and trust Eddie in so many different ways. I think it took the story and really flipped it 180, in my opinion, more so than Tessa's involvement for me.
Mm.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I love Chief Brown. I mean, I think he was such an incredible character. My father's a police officer, or was a police officer rather. And Jenny, I totally hear where you're coming from, because I remember being 11 and 12 years old and doing things that I wasn't supposed to be doing. And I remember very vividly, you know, my dad taking me down to the station, doing kind of like a Scared Straight kind of program in Miami, you know. So I totally get that, because now all these years later, I can so appreciate that. When in that time, you know, I absolutely hated my father, and I did for many years. It took me a long time to really repair that relationship, and it was kind of my doing as well, you know. And to see how Tyler, in a very much more expedited way, kind of went through that similar reconciliation process that I had to go through. I mean, I found so much commonality in that, you know, and even jumping real quick to that point with Tessa in the graveyard, where Tyler literally says, "I don't want to lose any more people in my life." That's something that I literally told my father when we met for the first time in 10 years. You know, that you really understand, like, you know, oh my gosh, you know, this is the hand that I've been dealt, the family that I've got. You know, we got to make it work. And as far as Alyson being upfront with Chief Brown, it's interesting to me too, because I confessed to Chief Brown, and he acted in a way that I really wasn't seeing. I mean, I was gonna expect that, oh, they're gonna make the cop the bad guy, you know, this guy's gonna fly off the handle and start screaming and all this kind of stuff, and he did the exact opposite. And it was really cool to see that character develop in a way, because we were introduced to this character as being a gruff chief of police who was by the book and who was willing to throw this sibling in jail for all these years. When we find out that, you know, Brown did everything he could to keep them together, to keep them safe, and to keep Tyler out of going to prison, by diverting Tyler to this other program.
And I think that's what excites me about this whole series, has how three-dimensional and how well written all of these characters are. You know, unfortunately, when this game was first announced, you would expect that there was some people online, trolls being what they are, and people criticizing this game, thinking that it is some sort of LGBT propaganda. I saw some quotes when doing research for this. And, you know, and it's not only is it obviously foolish, and we knew that ahead of time based on the pedigree of the developers and the lengths they went to make sure that this was as authentic as possible. But I think this game actually, to me, is almost hitting back right at those people and saying that this isn't some simple black and white story about, you know, good guys versus bad guys. We have a lot of characters who are incredibly nuanced, who are in bad situations doing potentially the best they can or adapting. So, I mean, even, you know, Eddie, to your point, Johnny, we saw his change based on the information that he had, but also Tessa and even Sam. We saw these characters that in some ways hold positions and beliefs that we are incredibly uncomfortable with. In other ways, we can kind of feel for them. How did you all feel about how the story handled these characters, how the developers handled these characters in that way?
I do love how everyone has their point. Like, everyone's different side of their story was 100% fleshed out. You get every single part to every single story. When you find out your answers, there's no plot holes anywhere, in my opinion. Yeah. Especially when it comes to Sam, and especially when it came to Chief Eddie. I truly, I'm gonna be completely honest, I didn't trust him throughout the entire thing. I kept everything from Chief Brown.
Why was that, Keelan?
Why? Well, when you start looking at Chief Brown and you see, oh God, my father and I do not have a good relationship. He's very abrasive. He's very in your face. If I told the truth about something, it wasn't okay, let's talk about it. It's like, why the F did you do that? Like, I got screamed at for literal years. So when it came to this guardian, father, uncle figure to Alyson, my immediate response was, keep Alyson happy, but don't trust him. Because I
feel you on that.
Oh God, I'm gonna start crying. I don't like being confrontational. I think there's always something better to do than just yell at someone. So I didn't experience that side of the story. You just kind of see him being like a little bit like tentative and less willing to come forward to both Alyson and Tyler. But yeah, I didn't give him any information. I was like, he knows what he knows. And if anyone else wants to give him the truth, that's fine, but I'm not going to. Which sucks in hindsight, because if I would have known that he wouldn't have screamed at me, I would have trusted him. But
based on the information you had, you acted in that way, right? Just like all the characters seem to be acting in a somewhat reasonable, rational way based on the information they have presented to them at that time. I think if that's fair to say.
Yeah,
Zach?
100%.
Well, I just think it kind of speaks to the writing as well, that we're able to, invest our own emotions and feel the actual, I guess, risk that comes with these choices. Is you feel for these characters, and they feel like real people enough to where, Keelan, like you said, you're actually, mirroring your own experiences into the character's experience and how you want to, things to turn out. So I just think it's a huge testament to what these writers and developers have been able to do to, really make us be in our feelings. I mean, it's just it's masterfully done.
Yeah. And speaking of feelings, we got a little bit of some feelings between Michael and Tyler. Can we talk about this? Chapter 2 level conversation, we should say. Let's get to chapter 3 soon with that. But Nicole, take it away for us.
Okay, so so you head to the grocery store to confront Tessa, basically about her visiting Keelan. Was it when she called CPS? Yes. There's so much that goes. Okay.
Sorry, you're talking about when they go to the grocery store. They originally to see Tessa, but she's not there.
Yes.
Okay,
yeah, she's not there.
Yes.
So, Tom's there. He's like, "Oh, Tessa's not here. She'll be out for a while." So you end up talking to Michael. He's like, "Hey, I gotta close up soon. Can y'all help me out?" And so you're playing as Tyler. You go help him in the storeroom. Help to clean up, and basically y'all have this little game where they have these they're little stuffed animals or dolls or something.
I think they're Tom plushies, aren't they?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yes, they are. They're political ones because he's running for mayor.
So basically, they play this little game of and it's cool because they actually let you control Tyler and let you throw these plushies, which I thought was really cool. But basically, y'all have this connection. I forgot what the conversation. Keelan, I need you again.
Well, they did towards the end of the scene. After they did the inventory, you had Michael wanting to chat with Tyler, and then Michael kind of said, "Well, I'm kind of into you," type thing.
Mm-hmm.
It basically got into I like you. Do you kind of like me? And there was a kind of that interplay a little bit, and then kind of advanced from there.
Yeah.
For the whole story, I definitely put, because I loved Michael. I felt I trusted him, completely. I playing these characters. I felt like I could talk to him. So I definitely did, trying to get Tyler and Michael together because I loved Michael so much.
Yeah.
Did anyone notice that when you did accept his advances, there was that icon where it was the twins growing further apart? Do you guys know? Well, I was a little confused about that.
I didn't notice that.
I didn't see that.
So the funny part about that, and I love those little icons because it truly like sorry, did I cut you off? Oh God, did I cut you off, Johnny? Oh, okay. I kind of thought of it as a way as I have 4 sisters. I'm a middle child of 5, and I have 4 sisters. So if I ever like wanted to talk to one of my older sisters' friends or my younger sister's friends or whatever, they're like, "That's my friend, back off." And so that was the immediate thing that I thought of. I don't think that Alyson ever had an issue with Tyler and Michael getting together, but I do feel like if you progress the game and made all of those choices where the twins split up completely, I feel like there would have been a piece of dialogue. I personally didn't do that because I love them 2 very much. But I feel like if I were to replay, I would have specific scenarios where I was like, I have to make sure the twins do not like each other or they want to be split apart and like never see each other again, to see if there's any difference in dialogue between the 2 and their interpersonal conversations.
Keelan, that's a really interesting point. Yeah, Johnny, please.
Sorry, Mike.
No,
well, it's really cool because Zach, to that point, and I thought it was hilarious because the reason that you get the twins breaking apart in that one instance and you never get it again after that, is because Alyson is like super jealous, which is so weird to me because Michael is an openly queer character, but it's that level of friendship. Like, this is Alyson's like best friend, and here Tyler comes around and they've known each other for 48 hours and now they're like, together at the hip. And Alyson makes a point of that when she comes into the break room and she's like, "Guys, I've been waiting here for an hour. Like, what's going on? Let's go." And she's like, really like what's going on back here,
Yeah, I didn't see it that way when I played it, but that totally makes sense hearing you all say that just from the icon and that dialogue. And I guess it's also just thinking about the fact that Alyson probably didn't expect it to necessarily, she thought in chapter 1, she hinted that that Michael and Tyler would be friends, but she probably didn't anticipate the potential romantic connection that was there as well. And I do want to say that I thought that romance there was handled like really well. Thinking about it, I'm almost like having trouble remembering it almost as a video game or even if it was like a scene from a movie or a TV. It felt so natural, like kind of like the flirtation and the things that they were pushing at each other. And even just to Nicole, your point about the little game that you played between each other, it was kind of a cute little buildup of the relationship.
And I think even that it was in that moment I decided Tessa was that girl I thought she was when when they were talking about the LGBT sign up on the door, and
Tessa,
he was like, "Oh, Tessa hates it," and I was like, so she ain't changed. So I think that definitely influenced my decision in the graveyard right after as well, because I mean it seems like she's still not having it, and I'm just kind of that person that's like, okay, bye. So I definitely think that discussion helped influence my decision in the graveyard.
Well, Zach, take us to the graveyard. So Nicole mentioned that the scene that we're talking about happened right before this. We're done, doing the stock work in the back of the grocery store. So why are we going to the graveyard? Why are we interacting with Tessa in the next scene?
Sure. So Tessa is there. You find out that Tessa wasn't at the store because she was taking care of some family business. And you just, I think Michael ends up telling you that she's in the graveyard. She's seeing her parents. Is that what it was? Her parents. And you get a little resistance from Alyson because, their mother is obviously buried in the same graveyard, and they had not visited their mother's grave since, the actual funeral. So you get there, and then Michael is also visiting someone there as well. He has some family there.
Yeah.
So they all end up going to the graveyard together to find Tessa. You originally find that Tessa is no longer at her parents' graves. Their original decision when going was to not visit their mother's graves because Alyson thought that it would be too heavy. But then they get there and they have a discussion and they say, at this point we're here, it would almost feel wrong not to go. So you end up walking towards their mother's grave. As you get there, they have a little moment where Alyson's like, I don't know if I can do this. They have a little aside. Some of their memories come back about the actual day that they were there with when their mother died and the funeral and the memorial service. And then you stumble across this woman from Georgia on the way to the grave as well. Did you guys have a conversation with her? There's another woman in the graveyard.
No.
Who talks about
Do tell.
So there's a woman in the graveyard who's visiting her husband's grave. Her husband went up in there to fish, and apparently while he was there, they were there as a family. The husband died in the fishing accident. And she ended up just staying in the town ever since for about 2 years. So you get in a long dialogue with her about how her family back home in Georgia wants her to come home and bring her daughter back. But she's like, I can't seem to leave this place. I don't want to leave my husband here. Even though he's passed, his body is in the grave there. You get into a whole conversation with her, and she ends up asking you if you think that she should take her child back to Georgia, or if you think they should stay there. And
wow. I didn't encounter that at all. I'm very curious about this.
The decision that's like, you tell her to go home, you tell her to stay here, or you're like, that is not my call. And I definitely picked that is not my call. I was like, girl, you got to figure that out yourself.
That's fast, Zach. I want to hear more about this, but can I get a quick show of hands how many people had that conversation? Because I didn't. All right, so half of us did, and half of us didn't. I'm wondering if it something that we might have just visually missed, or is it something that is triggered by a different part of the story that maybe it just indicates we made different decisions?
The conversation is over on the far end of the graveyard. So when they struggle to find Tessa, they go really, really far into the graveyard, and she's kind of on the back end of it.
Yeah.
And when they stumble across her and they start chit-chatting, and that's when she opens up about her story. So I think it was kind of a bridge or a guide character that kind of kicks you back into reality, maybe that the town's not so bad, and from a different perspective, and it could be worse. You're alone with a kid. and I think it also kind of triggered some memories about their mom, and their mom being the single parent raising kids in Delios. So I think it was an important, very minor character, but it kind of gave the twins a little bit of perspective.
Yeah. When I originally played through it, I originally thought that woman was Tessa.
Same.
It's like, I don't want to progress the story first without exploring everything. So when I originally progressed through it, I walked straight past her. And then when I saw that Tessa comes later, I quit the game and went back and went to see her. Because I was like, wait, this isn't who I thought this was going to be. And so I went and I had that conversation with her, and I decided to get nosy, and I said, you should go home, because it's been 2 years, but there's nothing stopping you from visiting your husband. I know it'll be hard every time you do it, but there's a point to where home is home. And if you haven't, a house is not a home. So if you can't create a home environment where you are strictly because of grief, that shouldn't be your motive to stay in a town where your husband literally passed away.
Excellent point. Yeah, I really want to, after this conversation, I feel like I'm going to have to replay that scene just to explore that some more. So when we actually get to the point where we're talking about Tessa, can you all talk about that conversation? And I was just flashing some of the core decisions you make in this chapter. Curious what you all did in terms of forgiving Tessa or not. I guess that kind of tells you what the basis of the conversation is. But can someone go into detail about what you were talking to Tessa about in the graveyard?
So for me, this is a really cool conversation. So you're basically going to the graveyard to confront Tessa and point blank ask her, why did you call Child Protective Services? And that's the whole point of the conversation. And what we come to find out is her reasoning behind that, and where she did that because she really cared for these kids and all of that. But there's still some things that we don't understand. And then we come into that conversation around forgiveness. And Zach, it's funny because I completely hear where you're coming from. And what I saw in my perspective was that I grew up in a very Catholic family. I'm engaged to somebody. My grandparents have met my fiance, and they are still fiercely Catholic fiercely Republican, all of this stuff. And so I really understood Tessa's character. And what added another layer to it for me is that I also, you know, growing up in Miami, you know, we have a lot of Native American and First American tribes in the area. So I had a lot of friends who had parents in these you know, First American clans and that kind of thing. And so knowing that Tessa was part of the Tlingit culture, and she was a Native American herself, I mean, these are views that, you know, cultural views that have been, you know, passed down for generations and all of that. And you see some of that in Chief Brown and the other Tlingit characters as well. And so I chose to forgive her because of that. And I mean, she really went. I think she tried to do as much as she could to really understand the plight of what these kids were going through. And I think another thing, what I think Don't Nod was so masterful about, and what I'm really happy to hear on this conversation and in last week's conversation, is that we haven't said 2 words about Tyler being a trans man and what that experience was like in this game. Mm-hmm. And I think that is so transcendent. True. And Jenny and I had this conversation, was that it's like the whole part of Tyler being trans takes a backseat to literally everything else. Yes. It is so masterfully told, but you have to look at it in that way, where Tessa, Chief Brown, you know, are living in this small Alaskan town, and for 95% of them probably have no idea what a trans person is, let alone have ever seen one in real life or talked to one. And here they are struggling with every ounce of their being because they love these 2 kids so much, to really just give them the benefit of the doubt, to understand what Tyler is going through, to understand why these kids are, you know, playing Scooby-Doo 10 years after the fact and trying to find out all these things. You know, I feel like you really have to understand it from that perspective as well.
Well, so that's interesting, because like I think, you know, it kind of also speaks to what Keelan said. It's so I was pretty decently close with my grandparents, and came out to them a few years ago and started bringing my now husband around. And, you know, I would bring him to dinner and everything like that. And then when I announced that we were getting married, they were like, "Oh, absolutely not. We're not coming to the wedding." And I haven't talked to them since. You know, I just kind of dropped them. And so I think it was definitely, you know, me sort of projecting that as well. And I was like, okay, if Tessa's going to be like this, bitch, bye. You know, so I think, again, that really speaks to, you know, the way that you can put your own experiences into the situation and react how you want to based on, you know, what you've gone through.
I think it's fascinating, you know, especially with Zach and Keelan's perspectives, that they both reacted, you know, Keelan with Chief Brown and not trusting a strong male authority figure because of his relationship with his father, and Zach with your grandparents and them turning their back on you and your husband. You know, I have the opposite relationship. My grandparents are dead, so, you know, my parents are the oldest generation left living, and my father, we've never been closer. So I'm the daughter he always wanted, and as a son to him for so many years, he didn't understand me. He didn't get me. He consistently rejected me. We had a horrible relationship. And when I came out to him a few years ago, he immediately embraced it. There wasn't even a hesitation. Mm-hmm. And so viewing this story through those lenses, I look at it as more of a redemption story, a second chance. And I think it's probably the oldest person on this call, you know, by a long, you know, I see that life is so short, especially after losing a brother. My only sibling passed away many years ago. And I think everybody deserves a second chance, you know, in your life. And probably why I cried so much during this. But the power of forgiveness, the power of whether they deserve it or not, the grace, was what made this story resonate with me so much. Yeah. And made me forget that Tyler was trans and I'm trans myself, you know, but I think it was just that power of them coming together in these pivotal moments and figuring the story out. And I think this town really, in a certain way, was rooting for them. They're like, we don't really want to know the truth. but we're not going to get in the way of the truth either. And I think that was super powerful too.
Absolutely. And I think we can add to that conversation one of the other larger side characters that we haven't discussed much, and that's Sam. I think Sam is a really interesting character. All of them. I'm a broken record when I say that. I don't know if there's any not interesting characters, to be honest. I can't speak for the woman in the graveyard, but I'm looking forward to having that conversation. Never thought I'd be saying that out loud, but Sam is really interesting. Of course, if you recall from chapter 1, our first experience as a player, not as the characters in the game, experiencing Sam in chapter 1 is with him holding a gun to you as Tyler breaking into your own home because you have no way in. And I think that sets a kind of a certainly negative tone. And based on that interaction as well, you have, I believe Sam misgenders and says a few comments to Tyler, and Tyler has an opportunity as a player. You have an opportunity to respond in that way. In this second chapter, I really did feel like Sam was continuing to try to help, try to be a part of their lives. And I gotta say, I was a little frustrated in chapter 2, kind of coming in like Tyler in chapter 1. I felt a little uneasy with how Tyler was kind of treating Sam. I don't know. That may just be me. And again, I'm not saying in any way that the onus is on the kind of the oppressed individual to kind of redeem the oppressor, so to speak. But at the end of the day, I truly feel like Sam was trying to kind of make an effort, and I thought Alyson kind of saw it in an area where Tyler didn't. How do you all feel about that? Sam as a whole, as a character?
I think that was really great. I mean, for me alone, and Sam was a remarkable character. And to your point, Mike, there were a lot of times in chapter 2 and even in chapter 3 where, like, you almost kind of like, you're like, Tyler, what the hell's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Like, but it was really interesting to see how they developed Sam in a way where, I mean, that's somebody that I'm sure all of us know. I have people like Sam in my family.
Yeah.
Where they always need that help, where they are struggling with addiction, especially alcoholism, and how that affects their life, but they are still so loving and protective of who's close to them. Sam pulled that gun because he had no idea who this kid was in this house that he's been, caretaking for 10 years.
Yeah.
And all of that. So I love Sam. He was great.
And so, it actually affects a small part of the ending. Did you confront him about his alcoholism or no? When you were talking,
I did not.
I did not either.
Apparently, in the ending, if you get the ending where they all leave the house, that you see a letter from Sam at the end, sitting on the counter. And if you don't confront him, the letter is kind of sad. And if you do confront him, the letter talks about how he's recovering and he's got a dog. And so apparently, it's better if you do confront him, but I didn't confront him either. I didn't have the heart to do it in the moment. But apparently it actually does affect Sam's trajectory in life at the end, you find out as well. So I thought that was an interesting tidbit. Did anyone else confront him about his addiction?
Yeah.
You did, Jenny?
Yeah. I thought Sam was probably for me, was one of the more sympathetic characters because he loved Marianne so much. I mean, he built her a barn. He took that house for 10 years, and they weren't even a couple. And it was just such a loving and nurturing relationship. And, and he didn't want the kids to sell that house. Like he had such a identity and attachment because there were so many good memories there that he kept reminding the kids, hey, y'all had good memories here too. It was almost like the lady in the graveyard, but more expanding from the fact that he kept reminding them there was good things about your mom. Your mom was not completely flawed as people were trying to paint her out to be, that she was a good woman and she really, really loved you. And I think that was a powerful and nurturing character that really kept the story more human and more realistic and more real life. And despite Sam's flaws of battling with alcoholism and addiction, I think he was probably one of the more angelic characters in the story, and in a certain way, kind of naive.
And we should say that if you look at the fairy tales, the Book of Goblins as well, and certainly in chapter 3, you start really piecing things together, and it had me reread the stories because then everything became so much more clear and it was that much more satisfying. But you really feel for Sam. This kind of goes a little bit into chapter 3 territory, but I don't think it's a spoiler in any way. Is that Sam had feelings for Marianne. He wanted to take it to another romantic level. And overall, outside of course, we see his struggles with alcoholism, but we don't really know how much that affected things outside of that scene. So he really is kind of a character that in some ways you really kind of feel sorry for in some ways, that he really wanted to kind of show affection towards Marianne. He felt for the kids. And there's a scene, I guess, we'll talk about more in chapter 3 when he kind of makes it much more clear, like kind of what relationship he wanted to have with Alyson and Tyler. Keelan, I know you were about to say something about this. Jump on in.
Yes. So if you remember from last week, when I went through chapter 1 and I first encountered the Book of Goblins, I ran through every story.
Yeah.
And this is going way back to the beginning of chapter 2 when you start putting things up for trash, donate, or keep in the house, and you get this little puzzle that you have to solve between the bear, the moose, and the star. Could be totally wrong on that last one, but like spoiler alert, but not spoiler alert. Sam is the bear. Mm-hmm. Sam is the bear. He wanted the relationship with Marianne, and you could tell the moment that he came out to the barn with them was when I could click that instantly. And you really get that sense of unfortunately friend zoning. And that's kind of another thing that made me kind of feel for Sam when Tyler would just say these little offhand comments that treated Sam like trash. And I was like, dude, like,
what do you all think was like the source of that? Of course, they had a very negative reaction, and of course, with the misgendering comments, and in no way am I suggesting that Tyler wasn't right to have some animosity towards Sam there. But it seemed like Tyler kind of took that another level. Was there kind of a masculine competition of sorts when they were like messing around with the barn? What was kind of the source, do you think, of Tyler's kind of anger towards Sam, because he never really seemed to let that go?
I'm going to comment again on my father. I remember a straight conversation that we had where basically my manhood had gotten insulted when I was 17, and my dad asked me, do you think he said that because you were gay? And my response was, does that make a difference? So I feel like there's almost a little bit of animosity from Tyler to Sam, mm-hmm. based on the fact that Sam misgendered Tyler at the beginning, but also now Tyler feels like he has to assert his manliness because he almost feels like Sam doesn't see him that way. Even mm-hmm. though you can see that Sam's starting to build into it, it's just simply a thing where like he's officially been insulted. So it's going to take a little bit to get things back into a normal setting between the two of them.
And we should say Sam and Alyson, I think, are 21, if I'm not mistaken. Either 21, yes. Yeah, right in that area. What was that?
Tyler and Alyson. You said Sam.
Oh yeah, not Sam. Sam is not 21. Tyler and Alyson are 21. We should be clear about. So age obviously factors in some of this. If we remember how maybe when we were a little younger, we might have been a little less quick to forgive in those situations. Anybody else?
Do you think?
Yeah, there's one more thing I want to point. I'm sorry, Jenny. Go ahead.
I kind of see it as Tyler is the young bull, and Sam's the old bull, and they both have been, trying to establish their territory. It was more of a territorial type thing because Sam took care of the house. He took care of the house when Marianne was alive.
Good point. Yeah.
It's kind of asserted himself into that territory, and now Tyler is getting this house ready to sell, and he says, "I got this, dude. I've been away for 10 years, but this is my place. Yeah. Back off." hand me the keys. You know, there was a lot of incidents about the keys because he withheld the keys to the barn.
Yeah.
Till chapter 2, and they're like, no, dude, you need to fork over all the keys. And I think there was a kind of that tug of war, and Sam didn't want to let those memories go. He didn't want the kids to sell the house. He's like, you know, this is you guys are going to regret it. You know, Sam was still stuck in the past.
Point.
And I think there was a little bit of that tug of war, or that angst, or that territorial type thing. And I think Tyler was feeling that too. He was like, "No, this is mine now. Your time was over quite a while ago."
And I think just when Sam comes back in chapter 2, and he and you need help with the fuse box or whatever. I don't know if y'all caught it, but it's such a gender trope too, because Sam, and to Sam's credit, he really tries that next time that he comes around to be open with Tyler and all that, to the point where, to even if it's to recognize Tyler's masculinity and that he's a man, you know, in that very first instant where they meet again, Sam gives Tyler a knife, but he gives Alyson like a fish to cook. You know, it's like the most like, let me give the boy the boy toy, let me give the girl toy, you know, kind of moment. And it really, to me, that was really heartwarming to see, because it's like, this is the only way that this guy knows how to like dealing with this trans person that he's never met before in his life, or has never dealt with anybody like this before. So that moment was where I really I just fell in love with Sam.
Same.
I really also thought it was really funny when Alyson was getting defensive about trying to solve the fuse box. I don't know if anyone else had this dialogue, and Sam goes, "Women, right?" And Tyler goes, "Sam, don't say that."
And again, that's a great point. It's like, that's Sam's way of like communicating. For him, it might have served him well in his life at sea, and camaraderie in a probably primarily male environment, potentially, right? And so it's he seems like that character that's struggling to adapt to the modern world. And in fact, he says so, I think, directly in chapter 1 and chapter 2. He almost says it verbatim when he's mentioning that he spent some time Googling. And so I appreciated the fact that Sam took the effort to try to kind of better himself in order to better the world around him in some way. Yeah, Sam, interesting character for sure. Well, with the time we have, I definitely want to start transitioning to chapter 3. Anybody want to talk about how did we end chapter 2 before we jump into 3?
So, well, and I think the ending of 2 has the sort of biggest effect on the ending of chapter 3.
Yeah.
Because you find out that, so at the end of chapter 2, they end up coming back to their house after the graveyard, and they see they see the barn is on fire, and they run inside, and this hooded figure slams open the door, knocks Tyler back, and you see him run away towards the docks. So they go and they get the box out of the shed, because they realize that the man was trying to burn this box on fire that was hidden under the planks in the barn. You open the box. I could not solve that puzzle. I just clipped the lock and broke into it. And you find out that it was some mysterious letters towards Marianne, urging her to get an abortion. And so you think that this was probably the man that wrote these letters, because he wanted to hide that evidence. And so you guys go down to the dock where the man had ran towards, and you start getting new memories. Alyson is scared to go on the dock because she's worried that these memories are going to be of that specific night where Marianne had chased Tyler onto the dock. But you realize that there is another memory that they suddenly remember, where they had viewed Tessa on the dock with this hooded man who was in a boat that he had pulled up to that dock, and they were having a heated conversation.
Well, Marianne, we should say.
Marianne.
Marianne and the guy were having a conversation, and she also has her shotgun in that scene. And she says very angrily, and in the exact same tone as their original memory of when she was about to shoot Tyler, was, "I'm going to kill you." Mm-hmm. And you see that her saying that really affected Alyson, because Alyson sort of runs off, and you see this look in her eye as Marianne saying, "I'm going to kill you," sort of runs over and over again in her head. And after, we get that memory is when chapter 2 ends. Then we move to chapter 3.
Yeah, that was a great recap. And we should also add that maybe we can also talk a bit more about how the relationship between Tyler and Alyson.
Yes, because Alyson did not want to go on the dock. And Tyler, because I think Alyson, was scared to relive that memory. And Tyler kept pushing her and pushing her and pushing her. And Alyson, I think, finally reached a breaking point and they got in a fight. So we sort of end chapter 2 and start chapter 3 to where they're not talking.
Yeah.
And Alyson is back at Eddie's where, she was before, and they aren't together. So you sort of wake up as Alyson. You can definitely tell she's having some fog going on. And I'll let other people speak now. So
that was a great recap.
And also, too, a couple important things that we didn't talk about is the Tessa's CPS report for Child Protective Services that came into play in chapter 2 that feeds over into chapter 3, because I believe the fight on the dock is about that and about to lose her kids. And this is where we start to see some of that storyline evolve too. Mm-hmm. That the twins think that a big part of Marianne's last days was struggling to be able to keep the kids, and that isn't completely true. We find out towards the end, but it is a part of the driving force, and it's part of the angst that the kids have towards Tessa as well. That it was Tessa's fault that she called CPS and did the CPS report.
So when I first encountered chapter 3, I think my favorite moment of the entire game was in chapter 3, and you're playing as Alyson. I think Alyson's at the police station at this point, or outside of Eddie's house, probably outside of Eddie's house. And Alyson attempts to use the voice to talk to Tyler. Alyson's ready to extend that olive branch and say, Tyler, you there? I need my twin, and Tyler doesn't respond. And that sends Alyson into a full-fledged panic attack. And so you get into this little mini game, which I very much enjoy, of her combating this panic attack through a little app on her phone. And I just think it's so good, because when I have my attacks that have become less recent, thank goodness, I meditate. Immediately after, I meditate, because it messes you up in such a big way mentally that if it keeps happening without any rehabilitation of any way, shape, or form, it's going to F you up.
Yeah. And I believe that panic attack was, I believe, chapter 3.
It was. Yeah. We're talking about chapter 3 at this point, correct?
Yeah. The panic attack was after Officer Greg's, not from the voice, because the voice happened when she was still at Eddie's. But the panic attack happened when she was at the police station, because Officer Greg's was harassing her about Tyler. And that's when she had the panic attack. She tried to use the voice when she was still at Eddie's and couldn't reach him. And I think she was about to go into one, but then Michael and Tom stopped by. And I think Michael was able to pull her out of it a little bit. Because did you guys tell Michael about the voices and the visions that she was having? Yeah, I did as well.
Yeah, if you all don't mind, I'm going to show the chapter 3 trailer. Again, it's super brief, and then we can continue to dive into chapter 3. So this is the chapter 3 trailer of Tell Me Why.
Our past is a lie.
Can you tell me what happened?
She had a gun. Our future is in doubt. I've just been so wrong about everything.
And our bond may be broken forever.
You can't keep running from this, Allie.
How can we learn to heal?
And begin again.
Together.
All right, that was the trailer for the third and final chapter of Tell Me Why. I'm making sure the audio is fully off there, so we're fully good on that front. When we started the conversation about chapter 2, Johnny, you were talking about how we had that cool kind of musical number. You were seeing the twins reconnect. You saw it was almost as if 10 years had been erased, and they were reliving their childhood, adulthood together, kind of as this family unit. And as we heard with Zach's recap there, Chapter 3 did not start the same way. In fact, it was the total opposite. Here they are living separately from one another. You're playing at this point largely separate from one another. That's a key difference in Chapter 3. Up until now, we were almost side by side companions through everything, and Chapter 3 takes us in a different direction. So last thing to recap before we fully dive in, the big question right here is also who potentially is their father, right? Based on the letters that were found in the barn. Is that figure the Mad Hunter? Is that also a result or helped result, unfortunately, in Mary Ann's death? A lot to unpack there. So let's dive into to Chapter 3. And I guess now we're in Chapter 3, so we're like full on spoilers. Let's unpack this.
One
all.
important note too is we had a couple unanswered questions from the viewers last week. I don't know if we want to touch on any of those.
Yes.
As well.
Thank you, Jenny.
At some point.
Let's actually bring those up right now. I think that would be perfect. So yeah, we had a couple questions from last week. Thanks so much to everybody who participated in that chat. So a couple of the questions, and these will be for all of you here. One of the questions was, could we imagine a game of this nature being developed and released 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago? What are your thoughts on that from like a creative standpoint, from a political, cultural standpoint? Jenny, I know we talked a bit about this. Yeah, please.
I'll take the trans side of it as somebody that has lived several decades, and probably a couple decades longer than anybody on this call. If I take 20 years ago, which would have been the year 2000, there'd been no chance in hell of having a transgender-centered pop culture thing, whether it be a movie, a video game, or anything, even if the technology existed. We were barely in the discussion. I would even venture to say it wouldn't even happen 10 years ago, because I would have put it in 2010, which had been in, the first part of the Obama administration. And we really did not see discussions about the transgender side of the LGBT acronym till probably the latter years of the Obama administration and the first parts of Trump, when you started seeing bathroom bills and you started seeing pushback, and really forced us into the national conversation. And I think people were starting to say, well, what are trans people? Are they transvestites? Are they cross-dressers? And you started getting all these conversations, and you started seeing pop culture things like I Am Jazz, Caitlyn Jenner, things of that nature, having TV shows, and start educating the general public. Some of it force-fed, some of it was a natural evolution. But I know as a trans person that lived for stealth for so long, that didn't start coming out till 2015, I can tell you from personal experience, I can't even imagine playing this game or even wanting to admit that I played a game like this in 2010 or 2005. It'd be like, well, why would you want to play a game about transvestites? Because that's how they would be. That's how I was viewed as a transvestite or a cross-dresser back then. And so I think the natural evolution of society, I think, is very much a 2019 or a 2020 type applicable pop culture thing. I think it would have just been inconceivable that it would even get any traction now.
I think the big thing to think about too, and that's such a great question, Mike, because the fact of the matter is that even in 2020, we're not seeing representation like this in video games. And I want to point out that DONTNOD Entertainment is a French studio based in Paris. This isn't an American studio that's tied to Xbox. They're part of Xbox Game Studios, but this is a very inherent European perspective on these issues. Because when we do see LGBT representation in video games, especially from American studios, and even more so from AAA companies like Rockstar is a perfect example. And we can look at GTA 4 or 5. A lot of things in Grand Theft Auto are obviously stylized, but when we do get gay characters across any developer, they're stylized. I can think of, the Ballads of Gay Tony. In Grand Theft Auto, where this guy is like this mogul in the 80s and he's like the gayest, like just floats everywhere. It's just so ridiculous. But then look at, and that was 5 years ago. Look at just a couple months ago when The Last of Us 2 released, and there is a character in that game who is trans, and we either get two depictions of LGBT characters in gaming. It's either that very caricature look at these characters, or it's on the other hand, we see these characters go through insurmountable pain and trauma and suffering, where in The Last of Us 2 was very criticized in that portrayal. And what's funny enough, it was criticized from both mostly straight heterosexual gamers who were saying, well, why are we dealing with this in a video game? Why are you trying to put this political LGBT statement in a video game? And then you got a lot of criticism from the LGBTQ community saying that, well, why are you dead naming this character? Or why is there so much trauma? Why does this character have to go through all of this pain? So I would even go as far to say that we're still not going to see a game like this for a long time in American gaming.
I totally feel you on that point, and I should add the second question that we also wanted to get to is something you referenced there, Johnny, was that the people in the chat were asking whether the area where the games were developed, the countries, the geography where they were developed, affects the type of games that we're seeing. And so you rightfully noted that DONTNOD is based in France. So I guess expanding this conversation across not only games but other forms of media, where does the United States stand, I guess, on producing accurate, authentic representation in this regard comparatively to other groups? I think we all acknowledge that this is still territory that hasn't really been explored in any major way outside of games like this.
Just a real quick follow-up to that, Mike, because that's a really great question. I want to make clear that this isn't a geography thing. You know, I stated that because it's more of a cultural thing than anything else.
Sure.
Look at Rockstar. I mean, Kotaku had that huge expose that Rockstar is basically, I mean, they go to strip clubs for their work functions. I mean, it's a very different kind of culture. Because at the same side of that coin, I mean, that is really what differentiates things. Look at Ubisoft. Ubisoft is a European company, and they're being plagued by sexism and all these horrible things right now as well, where, you know, their CEOs or their CFO rather was just fired for that. And it is still a very bro culture. Mike, I'm sure you saw the article where Ubisoft just today was heavily criticized by media for showing their Assassin's Creed sizzle reel and didn't feature a single woman. And there's all these really unique women in Assassin's Creed, and they're catching a lot of flack for that. So I think it's definitely a cultural thing more than a geographical thing.
Yeah, good point. Absolutely. Does anybody else want to jump in on these two questions right here?
And one really important point, and a good thing about the particular game we're talking about tonight, is that they were very respectful to the native Alaskan Aleutian culture. Like, everything that they did was of quality and depth, and was extremely respectful to mental health challenges. It is just like they did all their research. They didn't want to make this. They did more research than most people that did do Netflix series. I mean, it was a very, very, very. I keep going back to respectful, and it's something that Johnny and I had a conversation when we watched I played the first chapter at his place. I said, you could change Tyler to a cis male, and I don't think it would change the story. I honestly think it is more about mental health and secrets and small town culture. And I think it's more of a cultural movie that happens to have a very well developed trans character in there. And I like to see that, to where we're not either the butt of the joke or a circus freak. Is that being a trans male in this story just seemed normal. It just seemed, you could have made him a cis male, and I don't think it would have varied the story that much, come to find out. And I think that's what the trans community and the LGBT community always wants to see, is characters normalized, a gay male normalized, and not a flaming sissy, flamboyant, gay male, but a gay male lumberjack or gay male truck driver, or a trans woman that retired from special forces. We're not all just these extreme, or a butch lesbian, that there is femme lesbians, that they don't all have to be butch.
Sure.
Or a bisexual woman, she's not confused. She's just bisexual, and so there's so many misnomers about the LGBT community that play out in pop culture, that this one addresses it in a certain way, but in a respectful way, that it's normal to be trans.
Yeah.
It's normal to be fucked up. It's normal to have that alcoholic uncle figure. It's normal to have secrets. It's normal to have that religious aunt figure that's going, I'm trying my best, but I'm also going to be respectful to my religious side. And all these people, including the main characters, are all really effed up, and they all have deep flaws in them, and they're just human that just got congealed at the wrong moment at the wrong time, and this whole town's history got altered by this one night.
Yeah.
And I think it's very powerful.
That's a great point. I think that goes directly into how we start chapter 3 from Alyson's perspective, waking up back at her home, Chief Brown, Eddie Brown's home, waking up, and then you see Tom and Michael come over, and Michael mentions those things you said, Jenny, where he's like, families are kind of messed up, and it kind of goes into more detail about that. And I do want to say one other thing about Michael, because we'll be discussing Michael a bit more here. I guess I should say, are we good to go a little over time? Because as I should have expected this based on our conversation last week, we might be going to like 9:30. We're gonna have to go a little bit more over time today because we still got a lot to unpack. The relationship with Michael, I think, is kind of historic in that nature too, because here you have not only Tyler, a trans male, but then you have Michael, who we don't exactly, it's not exactly spelled out, sexual orientation or gender identity, but the fact of seeing the two individuals come together is, I think it's fair to say, a relationship represented that is not common in any form of media. So I think that needs to be considered, and I guess applauded for how well and how tastefully it was handled as well. But let's dig more into the specifics of chapter 3 here. So after Alyson is visited by Tom and Michael, where does the story go from here? Again, in this case, we're dealing with chapter 3 from two different perspectives, Alyson and Tyler playing a bit more separately than we had in the past.
So when you get into Alyson's, when you get into Alyson's character, when you get into her perspective, you are faced with the objective of grabbing a pay stub, an ID, and something else. I want to say something else I'm missing in there. You're presented.
You could make a gift as well if you wanted to for D.
Yes. So as you're going through the house to find these things, Alyson starts having not memories from her head, but rather different voices in her head, different people from the past telling her things that are truly self-destructive. Like it's her own mind messing with her, and she's trying to continue through this objective and find what she needs, but it keeps eating away at her, and then she almost gets sent into an attack, and then the doorbell rings, and you open it, and it's Tom and Michael. Michael ends up staying inside the house for a little bit. You'll have that conversation, and you have the choice on whether or not to trust Michael with the information of the voices. And obviously, I did personally. You go on. Michael completely trusts you. You have his support. Everything's wonderful. And after you move on, you get to go down into the basement because you can't find your phone, but you can hear it ringing. So you go into the basement and pick up your phone. I don't remember who was calling, to be completely honest with you.
It was D.
It might be D, and that's what prompts you to start making the gift if you choose to, because you can go to the woodworking station and make the gift. And then I think that's all that is.
I think that's where we finish there, and we should say D is a police officer for the Delos Police Department that is introduced briefly in chapter 2, and it's she actually mentions going to lunch with Alyson the next day, so we get there. Nicole, can you walk us through, once we get to the police station, kind of the interactions we have? I'm thinking Officer Greg's, especially there's some interactions there that trigger a few things.
Did we mention one important part, that Michael ends up volunteering to go?
I was about to say that.
Make peace for Alyson with Tyler, because Tyler's still at their mom's house.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, Nicole, if you want to talk a bit more about the police station, and then we can kind of talk a bit more about where Tyler is after that.
Yeah. So basically, you're going to the police station to take the documents to Eddie. But when you get there, he's busy interviewing somebody. So you're kind of going around like the police station. I think you have like a little conversation with Dee about like Dee's busy doing paperwork. So she's basically like, just chill in the police station until I'm done. That's when you go into the kitchen, and Officer Greg's in there. And you're just basically passing the time, having like a little chit chat with him. But then it kind of turns into, he's basically like, you know, don't let Tyler's like decisions bring you down. Basically don't, right, Keelan?
Yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah, basically kind of like he comments on Tyler being a bad influence on Alyson, which case sends her into a nervous wreck, basically.
Yeah, and we should say, you know, all this time you're also in chapter 3 trying to figure out in your head who potentially, if it's revealed or not, who the father of the children can be, because it's strongly implied that there will be some sort of resolution here. And I don't want to jump too far ahead here, because I feel like that maybe wasn't handled the best, I would say. I think I figured it out kind of way too quickly. I'm curious, when we get to that part, I want to hear what you all think about it. But I will say there was that moment where when Officer Greggs touches your hand when you're eating cobbler together, that you have this kind of reaction. And there was a brief moment in my head before I kind of realized what the storytelling was, where it was going here, that I was thinking, is she getting, you know, a triggered moment because it's a possibility she recognizes Greggs is the father? You know, I was trying to systemically go through every male figure that we had been introduced in the game and think if there was any possibility that they could be the father. Again, I think it's a little too obvious who the father figure is, and we'll get to that, I'm sure, within the next few minutes. Did anybody else have that reaction, or was that just me?
That was just you.
Okay, Jenny. Jenny, okay, I feel a little bit better. It was a brief moment where I was like, maybe, but then I quickly realized.
Greg had swung by Marianne's house at one time, maybe, and fathered the two kids. You know, just for a minute, I thought maybe, possibly, the reason he's interjecting is because he is the mystery father, that he's trying to be that father figure. Hey, don't let your brother that's a criminal, you know, influence you or take you down the road. You're smarter than that. You're better than that. And you know, however misguided and effed up that is, he is a police officer, and they tend to think that way a little bit. So I felt that for a second, but I kind of really knew who the real father was.
Yeah, and we should say,
but you never know. Based
at the end of chapter 2, when Zach was giving the recap of finding the letter in the barn, you do know that the father of the children, or at least the person that she was having an affair with, that the father was currently married at the time. I'm trying to do this in such a way where I'm not spoiling it, although I know we're going to get to it any second now. So you kind of have a bit of a pretty good of idea who the father could be. I was a little worried. Was anybody at least worried that it was going to be some like new character that was like introduced, which could have been handled well, but I was curious about that.
Because the same letter that you just referenced, Mike, it's actually signed Brent, and I'm like, who the hell's Brent? You know, and I'm like, oh god, you're gonna throw in some wackadoo.
Brent just like swoops in.
I know, right? Brent just comes in out of nowhere, is like, hey kid.
Yeah.
I thought it was Alexander, the guy on the ferry, and then the guy that you meet in the store, and then I thought he was being thrown in as a red herring, because I think there's also a part in chapter 2 where Eddie is questioning him in his office, and you can't go in to Eddie's office, but you hear Alexander talking to the police about like why he's in town currently.
Interesting.
And he kind of gives some sketchy responses. So I actually thought that he was kind of thrown in as like a red herring to throw you off the track.
I almost wish they played that up more, because I don't think I noticed that as well as you did, Zach. I think if that was played up more, it might have made the ultimate reveal a bit more satisfying.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a really good point there. So again, back to the police station. So we're at the police station. She has this panic attack. You have this mini game that Keelan mentioned, where you're kind of it was almost like a breathing technique, and you have it on your phone that you're playing there. I believe the next step is that she goes to visit Sam. Is that correct, or no? Did I mess something? All right, Nicole, steer me back on track.
So, and I almost missed this too, but basically you go back to talk to Eddie about because I think it's basically getting an apartment. So you're going back to talk to him, and like, you're still like really upset, and he's basically like, don't let, like, you got to let this go. Do y'all remember the big kind of choice you had to make?
Yeah, because this is where she can admit that she actually killed the mom.
Yeah. So, and I didn't tell him. I ended up choosing not to.
Can we get a show of hands for that one? How many people did not tell the truth to Chief Brown? So how many people did? Yeah, I'm curious. Nicole, can you tell us like what the response was? Because I didn't encounter that. So what was his reaction to that? Or I guess non-reaction to not knowing what the truth is. Was there a reaction?
It was basically just like basically the whole like let it go, kind of like move on. You got your life ahead of you. Don't let this bother you. It wasn't like really like a big deal. You still like, your relationship wasn't altered or anything. I'm just really curious to see what happens when you do tell it, because I almost did it, but I was like, I can't.
Can I ask why you made that choice?
I was afraid of like him, like, because I really liked Eddie as a character, and I didn't want to mess with the relationship, so I was afraid that he was gonna like judge me, and like the relationship would be changed like permanently. So that's why I didn't.
Gotcha. How about those who made the other choice to reveal to Eddie that Alyson indeed was the person who stabbed Marianne?
Well, I was nervous he's about to be like, okay, off to the cell. I'm going to follow the books like I did earlier. I kind of was just taking a risk and was like, hey, I'm interested to see, what's going to happen. One thing I was a little disappointed in was I had really hoped that it would at some point come back up with Tyler, that she did tell him the truth. But they never really talk about, her and Tyler never have a discussion about that. And I
think at the very end they do, if I'm not mistaken. The very end?
Okay.
I believe so.
Because I during the, I'm sorry, I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but during, the reveal where the dad threatens to, tell Eddie the truth, or, the police the truth, it didn't even come up that Alyson had already told Eddie the truth, which was another thing that I thought they sort of botched a little bit in that regard. It felt like it didn't have as much consequences as I was expecting it to. It kind of just, Eddie, reacted, and they were fine afterwards, and then she left, and the story kept going on. And I didn't really see too many ripple effects.
Were you disappointed with that, Zach, or you think partly? I wonder if that's Eddie would respond that way. Do you think is that inconsistent with the character we have thus far?
No, I don't think it was necessarily with Eddie's reaction. I think I was more disappointed our secret kind of deal. I was expecting it to blow back up between Alyson and Tyler more so than with Eddie, which that didn't happen. So I thought that's where that was going to go. But
interesting.
And that's what I love about that. Oh, I'm sorry, Nicole. Go ahead.
Oh, it's just a quick. Did I want to say, did Alyson end up asking Eddie if he was the father too?
No.
You're thinking of Sam. Yeah, okay. Age-wise, you get one clue that I believe at the time of the arrest of the children, Eddie was 28. I think.
Yeah, so he's currently 38 now.
Yeah,
and what we're playing.
Oh.
Yeah, in 2015, where they are currently.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, for some reason I thought that they had asked them that. Okay,
Yeah,
never
I
mind.
briefly thought about it too. I told you I'd like a tabulated, like all male. You know, like I was trying to figure out who at first it could potentially be, just to think of the storytelling standpoint if they actually tried to kind of throw you off in different directions here.
Building off of what Zach said about that conversation, I mean, what I did like about the conversation and what I did like about Alyson not mentioning it to Tyler was that what was so important about the beginning of chapter 3, and what I love so much about these games, is that it so encourages you to like click on every single item so you can get the backstory that isn't necessarily told in the story. And we see a lot of that. Like Chief Brown's character is so fleshed out, not through dialogue, but through the items that you find in his bedroom and all of that. And you see like the fact that he's organizing, you know, nonprofit functions and going to charity balls and all this kind of stuff. And you see literally a shrine to Alyson in his bedroom where you have all these pictures and all this kind of stuff. What I saw that more of was such an inherent father-daughter moment where, yes, Alyson and Tyler are twins, and yes, they're siblings and all, but they've been separated for 10 years. I mean, this is somebody that Alyson has come to really respect and revere, and we see that in how dutifully she defends Chief Brown from Tyler. So it was kind of cool to see that, though, because it did feel like, and Mike, what you were saying earlier, throughout the whole game, we were side by side with Tyler, yet here you're having this very private moment between a father and a daughter where she is just pouring her heart out to him, and it's kind of their moment, you know? Yeah. So it was cool to see that.
Yeah, and I think she's...
I was definitely expecting that little like thing like where the twins were going to be moving apart when, you know, she confessed to him. So I definitely was surprised that it didn't really have an effect on.
I thought about that part, Zach, and I totally feel you on that. But I think the reason why that is it's almost Alyson's secret to share at this point. I don't necessarily think Tyler is as tied to keeping the secret in the same way, only because Alyson is like haunted by this more so. And Jenny's made this point several times that after what happened, Tyler, even though he was punished, so to speak, and, you know, went to this fireweed, I guess, kind of juvenile detention system, he ended up kind of coming out better than Alyson. So I would hope that maybe Tyler could understand where Alyson's coming from and trying to unburden herself by relaying the truth to Eddie, her father figure, in that regard.
Well, and I think too, Alyson, because she did have to wallow in basically the town where she killed her mom, she also had to live with that lie for those 10 years living under Eddie's roof. So here is a police officer that's taking care of her, basically her guardian or her father, but every day that she doesn't tell him is every day that she's lying to him. And yet he's still taking care of her, you know, and you imagine after 10 years the angst. And now Tyler comes back into her life, but also Eddie's life, and they're still, as adults, they're still perpetuating the lie, even though they're having all these flashbacks. They know it's not true. Every time she sees Eddie, she knows she's lying to him, and they're all about uncovering the truth. So there's this huge dichotomy of they're trying to uncover the truth, but just like in the whole town being a town of lies and half-truths and mysteries, she's keeping the ultimate lie alive. And I think her character could not go forward in her life and develop the way she would need to do if she did not tell her adopted father, the truth. I think it would have shredded her. And I think that's why she was having so many, you know, if you want to call them visions or hallucinations or whatever, is because that angst of continually looking at Eddie in the eyes and talking about Marianne and not tell the whole story. I think that was a huge factor.
That's a great point, Jenny. And it does make me go back to chapter 1. I'm for some reason that got me back to chapter 1 on the ferry. When we're going into town, I honestly thought that through chapters 1, 2, and 3 that naturally there would be some sort of like subtle indication that the town doesn't trust you all. You know, you're coming back after 10 years. I thought that the story would go in some direction where people might be like, well, maybe Tyler's a murderer or anything like that. And it definitely played with expectations in that regard. I don't know if I was the only one who had that feeling, but the whole idea was, I think, the general... the town was kind of built on this, or I shouldn't say built on, but experiencing and this family, this lie. But at the same time, it was interesting how the characters overall kind of bought into the official story in many ways, and in some ways
but they had
not.
no reason. But they had no reason to not to do that, to keep up the lie, because the intention of the in chapter 1 was for them to, especially on Alyson's deal, is let's get this house fixed up. Let's sell it and let's get going. You know, Tyler's going to go be a park ranger and she's going to move to Juneau with Michael. And there was such a temporariness. And I think as they started getting invested and started uncovering all these memories, they're like, we have unfinished business. And it's more not about the house. It's about, we can't move on till we finally get the truth. And we've had this 10-year delay. And it's like, we haven't lived our lives yet, and we need to know, you know, and I think that's what is uncovered this big city of lies and everything it's built on, which it would cause so many problems. It's like, if you don't fix it on the front end, it's just like with any major problem, if you don't fix it on the front end, it always gets more expensive and more complicated on the back end.
Yeah.
And now you see all these lives that are kind of damaged in some ways, like with Sam, kind of destroyed. I think it probably sussed out the fact that when you see the flashbacks of Sam, for example, in his younger pictures, he's this virile captain and first mate, and he looks so robust and so handsome. And then you see Sam now, and he's just this downtrodden. He can't hardly function in his business. He's an alcoholic. He's drinking during the day. He's drinking at night. And he's just so dysfunctional. And probably what started that downward spiral was the death of Marianne and the breakup of that family that he loved so much and cared for so much. And I think every character unraveled, and not just the kids, but the whole town unraveled. But they don't want to talk about it either. It's like that dirty little secret that everyone wants to go, we don't really want to talk. We don't really want to relive that again.
That's an excellent point. Absolutely.
I was also sort of thinking it from a legality. Like, I know that Tyler ended up getting charged with homicide. You know, now that the chief knows, will that be dropped? What's the statute of limitations on that? Like, do they have to charge Alyson with something? Like, that's sort of, where I was thinking of as well. And, with him being the police chief, was that going to end up separating them again? Was Alyson going to have to go through court? So I was really interested of what the, legal ramifications of that confession were going to be.
But we learn about that, though, because that's why Brown sent Tyler through the diversionary program through Fireweed, because it's a juvenile thing. So once you clear that and you turn a certain age, and you're free to go, and your whole record is
right. But I was wondering, like, how was it like once they find out that it was Alyson, would she have to go, through, like, how does that work? I just don't know about that. I have no clue.
It's a good legal question, right? Because technically she wasn't charged in that case. I'm going to connect this directly with a couple things in the chat. Darth Sebulba was saying he also went by choice. I'm assuming, Darth Sebulba, you're meeting Tyler. Does anybody know exactly from the juvenile side here whether Tyler was all 10 years that Tyler was in? I don't know if it's clear that he was in Fireweed for all 10 years. It sounded like for the majority.
No, he was.
He was in Fireweed all 10 years? Okay.
Yeah, I think if you like the pay stub or something like that when you're in Chief Brown's office, you can see that's like a whole lot of money for 10 years of being there.
Gotcha. Okay. And so I'm curious about that question about going by choice, Darth Sebulba. If you can expand on that, that'd be great. Also, shout out to Grizzly Bear. Thanks so much for following. I see your comments and appreciate you wrote, thank you so much for having this talk. I love it. Yeah, we appreciate you so much. And to your other points, if you could elaborate on those, because you wrote, great point. You're so right. I had the same feeling. But since the stream is a little bit delayed, I don't know which points you're talking about. So please elaborate on that.
I will expand on one thing.
Yes.
In chapter 1, they do talk about the first 7 years. Tyler was actually, a ward of the Fireweed institution, but the last 3 he stayed on as kind of a mentor and a counselor.
That's right.
Because they talked about that, and so he got to repay the favor. It was kind of like his development time. That's when he started studying like land management and was planning on becoming a park ranger, and he kind of just mentored people. And so I think that was a very important point too.
And that's also when he transitioned, if that's correct.
Yeah.
Now that I be an adult.
Now that I think about it, because you said that the twins are 21 at this point, so usually when juvenile detention halls, like once you're 18, you're done.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're 21, that means that they had to have that 3 years of him staying on and being a counselor. So that's actually a good point. That's clicked for me.
Yeah, and Darth
out at 18. Yeah,
go for it, Nicole.
And Alyson, she even made that comment. I forgot what chapter it was, but they were basically talking about like why they hadn't talked so long. You know, she was like,
yes,
"Well, I had those like 3 years. Like, why didn't you reach out to me?" I think that's when Tyler was like, "Well, I was kind of finding myself like going through my transition." But he had the ability to talk to her. He just didn't.
Yeah.
But he also popped back and said, "Well, Alyson, you didn't come see me for 7 years, so you don't really have room to talk," type thing.
Mm-hmm.
There was that dialogue there, and then they both kind of just dropped it. They're kind of like, maybe we shouldn't even talk.
Well, I believe though for that, wasn't it Eddie? It was revealed in chapter 1 that Eddie prevented Alyson from visiting Tyler during those 7 years.
The first 7 years.
Yeah. And one other question, or let me actually read Darth Sebulba's points, and then I'll ask you all a question. I just came to my head. Darth Sebulba is saying, yes, Tyler, he chose to take the fall. Okay, you're talking about the choice to take the fall. Yeah, that's a great point. So he came to it with it, and it kind of made it Alyson's burden to carry or not. Yeah, great point. Grizzly Bear also saying, I had the same feeling that there was a dichotomy between Alyson and Tyler. For sure. There was a part going back with Eddie. Didn't we find like a college acceptance letter or something for Alyson there? That's not really touched on, but what do we make of that?
That was strange because she says that, oh, well, I didn't get accepted into the program, and there's a paper there saying that, oh, but you did get accepted, and that's like a huge deal.
It is a big deal, yeah.
And Tyler mentions it to Alyson, and Alyson's like, oh, well, that kind of sucks, and then they just move right on, and it never comes up ever again. So there are moments like that, and then the other thing too, in the beginning of chapter 3 in Chief Brown's bedroom, there's the phone number for Claire, who's apparently a love interest that never gets explored either, and there's no rhyme or reason for that to be there.
Yeah.
But talking about that too, and I wanted to touch off what Zach was saying earlier, and this is my last point on it, with the whole father-daughter talk and her confessing. That's, and going back to the legality of what they would have done if now the statute of limitations or anything like that gone. But I don't know how y'all felt, but what I felt from that conversation was that it was kind of an unsaid word between them that Chief Brown is like, going exactly this conversation, going through the legality of what this confession entails, and he kind of looks away and looks back at her, and you can see it in his eyes that, this is going to be kind of our secret, and that's kind of what I felt from that, why it was such a powerful father-daughter moment, because he's been protecting Alyson all of these years, for 10 years, so for him to now say, all right, the jig is up, we got to go to the authorities, would be so counterproductive to his character development. And the fact that he would now hide that fact and just keep it a secret and not let anybody know. He's the chief of police. Who would dare question him? He can bury that very easily.
And there was a letter in the house that you begin, when you're exploring, trying to get your documents together as Alyson, you do see like a thank you letter written to Chief Brown from someone, like a parent whose child committed offense that was probably arrestable, it sounded like, but he kind of diverted them out. So we do see that Eddie, while he is kind of the law and justice character, he definitely has the best interest. He has a heart and has the best interest of people in mind overall.
And if I remember correctly, it was like a DUI. Like he pulled the kids over in a car,
might have been that.
And they were drinking, and he's like, "Hey, let's get you home."
I think you're correct about that. So after that scene, I believe, is that where we then move on to Alyson going to visit Sam at his place of work?
Yes.
Can we talk about that? Because we're still potentially considering the fact that Sam might be the father. And in fact, I would say was he, even though, again, we kind of know who it was from the get-go, I would say he kind of ranked high as a potential father figure, right? Would that be,
He was my number one.
Fair? Yeah.
He was my number one.
So can I just ask that, I mean, I saw the father thing coming from a mile away.
Yeah.
And for me, and Mike, you're totally going to, well, I'm sure everybody on this call is going to get this, but for me, what I hate about these tropes is that, of course, it's like the guy running for mayor who's going to be the biggest sleazeball on the planet. You know, it's like always the political guy.
Yeah.
The dude involved in politics.
There we go. Yeah. Let us know what it is. Now that the cat's out of the bag.
Yeah.
Well,
Johnny...
yeah, they came out that Tom is the father. And, and that, for me, it was so like you could, from chapter 2, you knew that it was something bad was going to happen, because they mentioned this dude's campaign so many times that it wouldn't have made sense if it didn't come crashing down at the end of the series.
He had the most to lose, right? The most drama, for sure.
Absolutely. And then the whole thing with Tessa being as religious as she was, I mean, you could see that there was a battle being, orchestrated there in the final moments. I mean, that's the only, my biggest disappointment in the game was how obvious, at least to me, it was that, of course, they're going to tear down the political guy who's running for mayor and completely just,
Yeah, I think they could have shrouded
I saw
that
it
some
from
more.
a different angle, though. I saw it that Tom and Tessa, especially when they filed that CPS thing, was maybe going to try to take the kids and raise them themselves. That they both had the means, the wherewithal, they were a married couple. Whether it's a flawed thing that a single person can't raise kids, but in their eyes, they were the more established parents that probably should be raising Tyler and Alyson. And the fact that Tyler came out as trans, like, even more, Tyler needs Jesus and they need financial, and Marianne can't even feed the kids. That we're always feeding the kids anyway. We might as well raise them. So I almost thought for a long while that maybe they were going to try to take the kids, and that was going to come out at some point.
Well, to that point, why wouldn't they have taken Alyson,
Yeah, from Chief Brown.
Yeah, that's what because it kind of seems like she sort of abandoned them, I think, for a bit after that happened. So I guess, I didn't Tessa kind of let it slip too in the graveyard when she was talking about Marianne running around with married men. That was kind of the first indication that,
I forgot.
It felt like it was real personal when she said that too. So that was what kind of gave it away for me.
Yeah, let's connect that directly with Grizzly Bear's comment on Twitch, or question, we should say. Grizzly Bear asks, why was Tessa so fond of Alyson and Tyler, but they did not feel the same way towards her? Can we unpack that a bit? We talked about that a bit earlier.
I kind of want to answer this question with a question, because now that things are starting to connect, now that I realize how obvious it was, did you ever think about the fact of how fast it was for Alyson to get a job at Vinny Vitty Vecchi? I didn't think about that until just now, but imagine, I assume that they both knew, Tom and Tessa knew that, or at least Tom knew, and I feel like Tom would have kind of pushed Tessa a little bit further, she needs a job, she's in a bad place right now, let's hire her, and you already know these kids anyway. So I kind of just connected those dots. But truly, yeah, I think Tyler and Alyson, especially Tyler, is kind of blinded by angst towards her because, Tessa was Marianne's best friend, and then Tyler learned that basically Tessa turned her back on her, which, he thinks led into part of her going insane, which led to him thinking that Marianne just went straight up insane and tried to kill him 10 years ago.
Yeah. And of course, in chapter 1, when exploring Tessa's computer, and I think within the cabinet as well, you see that she's connected to or associated with thoughts of conversion therapy and things of that nature. So there's
well, and even
grounds
with
concern.
the LGBT sign, in the break room, Michael says Tessa's not a fan of it. So I mean, I'm sure Alyson's picked up on that as well, and having a trans brother, I'm sure there's always been some animosity there because, she knows they wouldn't be accepting of her brother's lifestyle.
So do we think Tessa acted in the best interest of the kids when she called Child Protective Services, or was this her way of, or it could be both, or was this her way of taking it out on her husband, who she never confronted about his affair with her best friend, I think potentially best friend? What was the roots of that?
Yeah, so she says it too in that letter at the end of chapter 3. I mean, she specifically says, like, I acted with malice and vengeance.
Yeah.
That is the only reason I called to make Mary Ann's life hell, because she wanted her to suffer as much as she suffered with that affair. Which, I mean, there's also a lot like that. What I hate about it, characters kind of unravel in the end a little bit, because here's Tessa, who's so pious and all of this, and is dealing with this affair and all of that, and she just doesn't know how to react, and she reacts in a very non-pious way, right?
Okay, so you all forgave Tessa, right?
Yeah.
Was I the only one that did not? Because when you don't forgive her, she fires Alyson from the store.
Oh wow!
And then the letter at the end of the thing is nothing about like learning, or she's still with Tom.
Really?
Interesting.
She doesn't leave him at all. Yeah, so like that actually has really big repercussions, because Tessa does not get redeemed at all if you don't forgive her, which I thought was
very interesting. Okay.
Can I make a tiny little note that's kind of like, it's kind of like an but it's not. I kind of wish that when the twins are together, they had more opportunities to use their voice to speak before they make a drastic decision.
Yes.
Because that was my favorite part, when you get to discuss between the two twins about the task at hand.
Yes.
I think it adds such a dynamic aspect of twin telepathy. It's like you have the opportunity to talk about it, to understand how the other twin feels before you make the decision that changes the course of the game.
And it was only introduced towards the end of the game, truly, in that regard. Like at the end of chapter 2 and chapter 3, it's done throughout. But I totally agree. I feel like that was a slightly missed opportunity that might have been cut just for narrative purposes a bit in the earlier chapters. But I agree. I would love to see more of that as well. How do you all feel about that?
But they were separated for 10 years too. So I think part of their development is growing together back as a family unit.
That's an interesting point.
Is that, they were physically separated, which is very detrimental with multiples, especially twins. And I believe they were identical twins on top of that. So you had two very powerful bond that was broken, and that really caused a lot of angst in them and resentment from towards each other, but towards the people that separated them in a certain way. So I think the telepathy was only coming back or getting reintroduced as they became more familiar with each other again, because when the last time we saw each other, they were 11.
Yeah.
And now they're grown adults that can buy beer, so
and I think that
two different people
addressed in the conversations they both have with Michael in chapter 3. And, you get the option to say, we're just too different, or they both admit that they played a fault in their fight with each other. And I didn't pick the we're two different options because I didn't want them to grow apart. So
yeah. Let's dig into that as well. First, I want to give a shout out to Grizzly Bear. Thanks so much for subscribing. We really appreciate it. We're glad you enjoy conversations like this. That it truly means a lot. Seriously, we all send our love here. And in fact, let me check out your comment here. You wrote, Tessa never had kids of her own. It seemed to me that she was living vicariously through Mary Ann. Interesting thought there. How do we all feel about that? And the fact that, we also see, I believe Tessa was the pelican, if I'm not mistaken, in the stories. And so we can see that Mary Ann, from my reading of the Book of Goblins, she actually saw a lot of the actions that Tessa was taking, including overlooking some of the shoplifting and things of that nature. How do we all feel about that? How was Tessa's relationship with the kids?
I think it started out when they were in chapter 1 of the house. They talk about how much Tyler and Alyson loved Tessa.
Yeah.
Especially I think Tyler loved Tessa a little bit more than Alyson did. I don't exactly think high of Tessa when the twins are now adults. It's kind of a situation where, again, there's like this animosity of like, you left our mother to rot, like you hung our mother out to dry with 2 children. It's one of those situations where there's a lot of I'm trying to think of the word. There's a very big grudge held towards Tessa. So I feel like they had that great relationship, and the moment that Tessa just kind of up and left, things just went downhill in their relationship.
Well, I think everyone had their role to play in Tessa's death. I don't know if you guys caught in chapter 2.
Marianne's death, yeah.
I'm sorry, yeah.
I was just checking just to make sure your game didn't go in an entirely different direction.
That would be interesting.
Tessa called child services, and then I don't know if you guys caught it, but in chapter 2, when you're going through the files, it's a small detail, but you find out that the shotgun was registered to Sam. So Sam gave her the shotgun. Tessa was the one that called child services. Eddie was the one that, enacted and implemented that call and then came to deliver the news to her. So I think it's interesting how everyone sort of played their own role in, contributing to her death and how it all affected them. And I think, speaks to why they did all turn their back on her. Or it really, the effects that turning them back on her did have, because they realized that, all of that did contribute to her killing or trying to kill herself ultimately.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all the characters, I think, again, are kind of living with a level of guilt here, because I don't think none of them, I don't think, anticipated, I guess outside of potentially Tom, and we'll get there in a moment, that their actions would have such severe consequences, right? They didn't necessarily see their actions as part of this whole kind of dominoes that was going to lead, unfortunately, to Mary Ann's demise. Want to briefly look at a couple things just to get us back on the chronological path here. Real quick about Sam. Sam, there was a moment where I felt he was saying, when Alice had asked directly if you're our father, and he said, I wish I was, I think, to that effect, which I thought was it was like, oh, I feel you, Sam, in that regard. I don't know if we had thoughts on that before. I believe we then jump over to Tyler fishing with Michael, if I'm not mistaken, on the chronological counter here. Any thoughts on the Sam before we go over to fishing and mini games?
I do very much enjoy that Sam is very, very... He's a shell of his former self. And you can tell, like, even from chapter 1 to chapter 3, there's such a big divide in attitudes between Sam. And you really start to catch on when you see what it looks like inside of his little apartment that he has inside of his business. You can truly see that things are not okay. And you really see that there are things that have affected him. You see that he still kept pictures from years ago, which leads into another part of the story, which I found was amazing. And you get into this conversation and you start really speaking on like a human to human aspect. It's no longer guardian figure to daughter figure. It's human to human. Like, I wish I was. There's nothing that's saying that like one is lesser than the other, one has authority over the other. He's literally speaking to Alyson as a human being, which speaks to how much he'd grown in 2 short days, according to the timeline.
Yeah. And how truly connected he was to them. It wasn't something where he was rejected by Mary Ann and just left their lives. Even after Mary Ann's death, he still fixed the homes. He's still, still trying to connect with the kids. So he's still invested in a meaningful way. I think I heard, Johnny, were you going to say something?
Yeah, and talking about that, like, I kind of wonder about Sam's character as well, because we come to find out, Tessa makes it clear in chapter 2 that Mary Ann is sleeping with every married man in Delos Crossing. And we come to find out that Sam lost his whole family because well, it's not specifically spelled out that he was hooking up with Marianne, but Sam had a wife, Laura, who left him over what we come to find out is whatever Sam's relationship was with Marianne. Find out that Sam has a son as well, and that Sam has this horrible family life. Even when it comes to the boat, his cousin or something sent him a boat, and the cousin's like, "Oh, the only thing you've done has drink beer on my boat to see or see how much beer cases you can put on my boat." So that's where, to me, I wonder if it's like he says, "I wish I was," because of everything he's lost.
Yeah,
really changed. You know, after what he really wanted. He really wanted Marianne. That's what he wanted, but he already had a whole life and another family and all of that, and he gave all of that up just for Marianne to be killed literally months or years later. I think that was in 92 when they divorced, and then 95 or I'm sorry, 2005 Marianne died. But you see that, you know, this man has literally lost everything, and he's sleeping like on a futon at this point. You know, so I go to that thing, and I'm like, you know, is he saying it because he has lost everything because of his love for this family?
It's a good question.
You know,
well, and I think because the wife left because she was uncomfortable with his and Marianne's relationship, right? Yeah.
There's something about Marianne, right? I mean, Tom kind of says the same thing. Honestly, like, isn't it interesting that there's like references to the fact we slowly, towards the end of the game, actually get a window into Marianne's life before she came to Delos Crossing, where we realize that she grew up in, it sounded like maybe in a wealthy family, or we have reference to the Gold Queen, her mother, growing up in ballet, kind of a strict kind of parent household that had an expectation of how she would carry on her future. But we also see that she was kind of worldly in that regard. I guess she had access to education, I assume, is what I got from that. And both Tom and Sam seem to reference the fact that not only did they find her attractive, but they also were attracted to her mental qualities, and fact that she had seen things, been places that they had not. So I think that's something.
Well, and she had an education in engineering and other things, and had been all these places and done all these environmental things, and lived in a commune, and had a life up until, and I don't know how many people got this option, but, and maybe we jumping too far ahead, but she does have a baby before Tyler and Alyson as well.
Oh man,
and
that's a huge moment. Yes,
that's a huge
moment
left
right,
turn.
Sorry. That moment right there was what I said on the last week when I said she doesn't deserve Mother of the Year, but Lord help that woman. That moment right there is what I was referencing. Yeah, because I cried harder than anything, any part of the entire story. I cried at that part. Because while I don't know how it feels to lose a baby, I know several people who have. And that has destroyed their mental state. Mm-hmm. So I truly felt like my heart was broken.
Absolutely. And we should say that is kind of like the culmination of the experiences. I believe to connect these together is that you get a photo showing Sam, who built the barn that you spend some time in the game in, and you realize that it had a loft and an upper area that the kids had no idea about. Sam mentions that he respected Marianne's privacy and so never really asked, or even after she died for 10 years, never went up there to check. And so when Tyler and Alyson go up there, they see this beautiful, like, essentially kind of museum to the Book of Goblins that Marianne, their mother, has built, which are also puzzles, which did feel a little bit gamey, if I'm being honest. But it looks like Marianne designed this for her children, and you hear all these revelations that she had a child, that she had a whole life. She was doing ballet. She was in Juneau at one point. All these things that you had no idea, that Marianne never shared with her children. Nicole, how did you feel about kind of those revelations in the barn, and how did you feel about the puzzles as well? Because suddenly we're hit with like Puzzle City, a lot of them at once.
Well, some of the puzzles I ended up kind of looking up the solutions for. Just like learning about her, like, ballet and this, like, life that she had and how strict her parents were. And then just like how, finding out that, she had a child,
Yeah.
and, now they have this, like, well, they had this, other sibling. And did they ever talk about who the father or who that was? Because obviously, was it Tom? It wasn't Tom.
No.
That was probably like some other, okay.
I think this was before.
It was, yeah.
It wasn't Brent, though, right? I didn't think about that, but is that...
So Brent is the father, because in the note, in the letter that you uncover in the loft, the dad says again, like, hey, like, if you need the money, we'll help you. Your mother was just trying to take care of you.
Okay, yeah.
You weren't ready to have a child. And it's signed dad, but that has to be the same person who's saying, I'll give you the money for this abortion or whatever.
Yeah, but that, like, that just made me feel for her even more. Because, like, I couldn't, imagine just that, like, losing a child on its own. Like, I couldn't imagine, what that would, put on, your mind, or how that would change you. So that it's just one of those things that just made me, like, feel for her, like, even more.
Yeah, for sure. And just to be clear, based on the story, she does lose the child, correct? Like,
yeah.
Okay, just to be clear to our audience about that. Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of, you see the analogy to the tiara of a princess and having the tiara and losing her tiara and is no longer feeling as a princess. I want to read another comment here from Grizzly Bear. Everyone is amazing here. Thank you so much for your voice and perspectives on Tell Me Why. Yo, clap it up for Grizzly Bear. Thanks so much. Appreciate that. We love these types of conversations, and I'm so glad you do too, Grizzly Bear. That the love means a lot. We really appreciate that. So yeah, we're working on these puzzles. We're doing a lot of the goblin, looking at the tales of the goblins and trying to unpack. What were the biggest revelations you all felt at the top of the barn in the loft?
Ooh, it's one of the side ones. Oh God, I can't remember. It's in the bottom left corner, and I remember it being in the bottom left corner, but I can't remember what the story was about. By the way, I finished all of these puzzles. Like, I did all.
Yeah, me too. I love that.
Like all of these puzzles, I finished them all. That's why, like, you can kind of see me like, oh, really, you didn't finish that? Like, I did that to Zach and I did that to Nicole just now.
Which bottom left one?
Like, okay, so if you're facing the big one that like looks like the Mad Hunter, even though you turn the lights off, it's not.
Yeah.
When there's one on the bottom left, it's like 1, 2, 3, and there's one on the bottom left, and I can't remember what the story was. But I remember that puzzle distinctively. It's the one where it's the one after you piece together the life and it makes that little map. It's the one after that, and I can't remember what you learned from it.
That was Sam's letter, wasn't it? Where he confessed his love for her?
Yeah. Yes. That was what it was. That was a really big moment.
Yeah.
For me, because as someone who rooted for him, like full on Tyra Banks, America's Next Top Model, I was rooting for you, kind of feeling like I was like, oh my God.
Yeah. You were hit with a ton of emotion and a ton of backstory in that specific room. And yeah, I definitely wanted to kind of uncover everything about it before I left, because there was so much to unpack there.
Was there anybody here that got all the collectibles and put all of them on the logs? Did anything happen if you did that?
Remember when you guys had to cut me off last week?
Yeah.
Which time, Keelan?
Right at the end, when I said you got to collect a specific thing and put them in and unlock it. Yeah, that's what happened. That's basically what you get. You put all the collectibles together and unlocks a secret component. You get a code. You put that in on their website, and then something extra happens.
Oh, interesting. I think I missed like 2 of them, and I was just like,
I missed 2 of them too.
Yeah, I was wondering where those things were. Just to backtrack. Sorry, go for it, Keelan.
I love the little. I love the music that happens when you put all the collectibles in, and dun, dun, dun. So I just thought that was like a really cute moment.
Yeah,
how like they all come together, and then I don't know. I truly enjoyed every bit of Easter eggs you could find in the game.
Yeah.
Like how you can, when you're at the graveyard, I don't know if anyone saw this, there was a tree trunk.
Yes, I was just about to say that.
Yes, the tree trunk that has OA for Ollie and Alyson. You have the ability to change it. You change the O to a T, which is Tyler and Alyson, and you get a little achievement from it. And I thought it was just
so. I was actually thinking of a different tree trunk. I'm glad you mentioned that because I love that scene as well. But I might be mistaken here. But when you open up the secret box with the baby's name, you get a picture. And it looked like it was from the location that they visited as kids, that snowy area with the wooden carvings. And if you remember, Tyler said, "I feel like I've been here. I feel like I've been there." Mm-hmm. And so my interpretation of that, and I could be wrong here, was that Marianne was taking them there because that's where her child was buried, because it looked like there was the exact tree that was in that area. Keelan, I see you nodding, so you're in the same boat as me here.
Oh, I connected that immediately. Yeah. Yes, 100%.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting scene there. Zach, did you want to jump in? I see you. It looks like you're.
Yeah, was that after they in chapter 2 when she had gotten the call from the realtor?
Yes, exactly that scene. Exactly that scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was the connection there. So a couple other things. I know we're long here, so appreciate our guests and I appreciate our audience here. Just to go back real quick to Tyler before we kind of go to the big finale here. We have a scene where Tyler and Michael are fishing together. One of the more minigame centric portions of the game. It's also a potential romantic opportunity depending on the choices that you make between Michael and Tyler. Can I get a quick show of hands? Who got their smooch on in this scene? Everybody, look at us. What does that say about all of us that we're just the romantic bunch here?
We love love. That's all it is.
I almost wanted one person to not have done that just so I could hear what the reaction was, but I guess we'll have to potentially Google that. How did you all feel about that scene overall?
It was really well done. I mean, and we talked about it a little bit earlier. I mean, not only do we get this game that features a major publisher's first transgender character, but we also get arguably a romance that has never ever been before in gaming. For a trans female to male having this relationship with a queer native person, I mean, you just don't see that.
Yeah.
And again, it was done so well, and I really enjoyed that they didn't make it all about the sexuality. They where Michael never flat out comes out and says he's gay or pan or bi or whatever. I mean, he's just attracted to Tyler, and Tyler's attracted to him, and they go with it. You know, so I really loved how they did it and how tastefully it was done, and I mean, it was just incredible.
And through fishing, we should say. When we were talking about we've never seen a scene like this, Jenny, I think you were saying earlier how these are like non-traditional depictions, and non-traditional in the sense that they're realistic depictions and they're not stereotypes. So I think this is one of the so everything you said, Johnny, on top of them fishing, that's a unique depiction. I don't know if we're going to see that specific depiction again.
Well,
there.
I think the whole dynamic of a trans male dating or having a romantic interest in a cis male is very rarely depicted in even queer culture. You know, it's typically a cis gay male won't. You don't see a lot of them dating a trans male because a lot of times, and I've just seen this with support groups and with my experiences with transgender groups, typically a cis male that's involved with a trans male is because they were involved with them before they transitioned. And they were already in a romantic deal where they were presenting as female and then transitioned. So it's really, really rare, at least in my experience with the transgender community on this end of it. Like vice versa, it's kind of a weird interplay when you see trans women like me in relationships with cis females, when I transition, now all of a sudden it puts them in the lesbian box. And so it was kind of an interesting, non-traditional, very rare occurrence in the trans community that you see this. And from the cis gay male perspective, a lot of cis gay men, when they find out that, oh, you're a trans male, well, that kind of puts me in an awkward position, because not necessarily the narrative that I'm looking for, you know, and so that was a very interesting choice that the game makers made from a cultural standpoint, that you don't. I can't of all the relationships I can think of that I know about in my personal life, both in Texas and here in North Carolina, I can only think of one offhand that's like that. Out of hundreds of people I've met through different groups and advocacy and big statewide meetings and things like that. So I mean, that's how rare that type of cis male and trans male relationship is.
Yeah, and they kind of just let it be in its natural state without drawing attention to it in any sort of inauthentic way.
They made no big deal of it at all, like the rest of the trans male narrative in the deal. They've downplayed the trans male side of it and not made it a fetish or a weird thing or an oddball thing. It's just like, he's a man. You know, with Tyler, they just, you know, kind of like Sam's recognition of it by giving him the pocket knife is just kind of like, he's a man. Everybody accepts it. Like, it's the least of our, or maybe it's the least of our worries, because we're talking about murder and lies and intrigue. Maybe there's such a gravitas to the rest of the story that the town's kind of like, him being a trans man is the least of our worries. We could care less about that. We've got all kinds of hijinks and chicanery going on here. So you know, maybe that's a nod to just reality, and people, maybe that's all the flawed characters can handle.
That's a good point.
You know, I mean, like, kind of like 2020. I mean, I think this story's an allegory of 2020. Like, we haven't even thought about the killer hornets anymore, because we've had so many other things going on.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost to be expected in that regard.
I think if Godzilla tears through Tokyo next, we could be like,
2020, right?
It's not a big deal. We still got COVID to deal with and an election, so
I feel Grizzly Bear has an interesting point on this. Grizzly Bear says, I like that they tied it more to their personality match rather than their gender match. I think that's an excellent point for sure. Can you all, because with the time we have left, I definitely want to take us to that explosive finale right now, but was there an additional scene? I'm having trouble remembering after the fishing scene where Tyler goes before we get to the big finale.
Tyler doesn't go anywhere, I don't
Tyler's
think.
less of a role in chapter 3, I guess, as much as Alyson is.
I think so. I don't think Tyler goes anywhere. Tyler kind of stays at the house, and then after Alyson finishes talking to Sam, she goes to the house as well to have that conversation with Tyler, and Michael's there. Michael gives them their space and leaves.
Yeah.
And then
right.
Alyson comes forward with the barn picture to show that there's a little lever to get into the loft of the barn.
Yes.
In which case you find everything, you do all the backstory, all the lore, this, that, and the other. You finally get to the point where the twins start talking about who will the father be, which we have already established is Tom Vecchi.
Yeah.
Who's running for mayor. And so once they all figure everything out, Alyson then calls Tom and says, we know we need you to come to the house. And then time flies by, it's nighttime, and Tom shows up in a raincoat coming out of his car, and it's about the most I remember before we get to explosive conversation.
No, that's a great recap. And we should say at that point, then we kind of have it established that Tom is essentially the Mad Hunter in the depictions, and that we have seen Tom before, not only as the figure who is going to burn the barn, but also that that Tom confronted Marianne about having the children. as he was the father. And then it goes a step further from there, because we see when Tom comes to the house, he actually kind of recounts what happened there. Let's unpack that specific piece. Nicole, do you want to jump here about the conversation between Tom and Tyler and Alyson? It was a pretty tense conversation with a lot of like big moments. What were your thoughts about that? Oh, you're on mute, Nicole.
Sorry.
All good.
So I kind of actually, because I never finished like the last bit of the game, so that's where I kind of like left off. But I remember.
Oh yeah.
They called him. He comes to the house. Basically, you know, he's talking about like his campaign. Like, first he's like, well, you don't want to, you know, let this get out because you don't want, you know, your life to change. But obviously he doesn't want his election to get ruined. He doesn't, you know, want this to all fall apart. And that's where I left off. So.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we're gonna, I guess, take it home for you here, because there was a lot that happened right at that moment. Big stuff. So does anybody want to go into all the big information? So like the final conclusion to what actually happened that night 10 years ago?
Yeah, so I think we find out that when Tyler looks to the side while Marianne is essentially chasing him with the gun, the Mad Hunter figure that he sees is actually Tom. So Tom was there that night, and I think Alyson starts to say, well, we're going to tell everyone that you're our father, and then he, because of his campaign and all that kind of stuff, they're angry, and he's like, well, I can tell your secret too. That lie that you guys had of an act of self-defense. He's like, I was there. It wasn't an act of self, like she wasn't going to kill you. And so they sort of, recount the fact that, Marion was saying, honey, I'm not going to hurt you. Tom was like, I was there. I saw it. She was not trying to kill you. She was trying to kill herself, essentially. And so then that's when they go back to the docks and try to, discover their memories. And so they both recount what they believe to be that night. And you sort of see Tom's point of view, where Marion's very, obviously losing her mind, but is trying to reassure Tyler that she's not going to hurt him. And then that's when Alyson comes up and stabs him. And then you have the other version where...
Stabs Marianne.
I'm sorry, my names are all over the place tonight.
That's all good. All good.
And then you have the other version where Marianne is saying to Tyler, I'm going to kill you. And she is being threatening, and it is an act of self-defense. And so then you're kind of faced with the decision of whose version are we going to believe? Are we going to believe Tom's version, or are we going to believe, what we remember? I actually chose Tom's version. And I think I did that because of that ending scene in episode 2, where they put so much emphasis on Marion saying, I'm going to kill you, to Tom on the dock with the gun. And we see throughout the game how distorted their memories have become. So I chose Tom's version.
I did as well. Can we get a show of hands on that one? How many people went with Tom's version?
Ooh, we have an outlier.
Well, Nicole didn't get to that part, so that's the only reason.
True.
Right. That part. Okay, that part slightly is concerning to me, because I have actually trouble understanding how I could have not gone with Tom's version of the story in that situation. I feel like at that point, and I was just airing the decision percentages, so I think it was overwhelming that the people who played this game chose Tom's, or Alyson's, I guess, as well, kind of vision for what potentially kind of happened there. What do you all think? I was a little surprised, and I was taken aback that Tyler, at that point in the game, at that point in the story, was still kind of suggesting that Marianne might have tried to kill him, maybe because of the trans factor, or maybe something else. That part was a little like, Tyler, you still think that?
You were playing as Tyler, and you just had to choose between Tom's version and Alyson's version.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a Tyler Alyson thing; it was a Tom Alyson thing. So I think Alyson wanted to believe that she
You're right.
didn't
My
kill
fault.
her mother.
Correct. Yeah, I said that wrong. Exactly.
Yeah. So it wasn't a Tyler Alyson thing. It was Alyson trying to convince herself still that she, was acting in Tyler's defense rather than it being a misunderstanding. And, she killed the mom when there really was no threat to Tyler's life.
Sure. But did that part that I mentioned did that surprise you all? Like that Tyler would still say that at that point? That threw me off. That Tyler at this point still, there's a part of him that, I mean, again, the trauma of having a gun towards you, your mother aim it at you. But at this point, like, I feel like Marianne is a more redeemed figure. I almost wish that they actually included potentially more depictions of negative interactions between Marianne and the kids if they were going to try to depict her as negatively as Tyler seems to feel towards her, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it felt very forced in that interaction, and then to come to find out that she's looking like a mess because she's been crying, and then it's revealed that, well, no, she was loading the gun and all of that and crying hysterically because she was about to end her life, and to me, I mean, that was the good option. I mean, that led to the good ending, because even, while the credits roll, you have that splash screen about the suicide prevention hotline. So, I mean, it was...
Yeah, it was either she was going to kill just herself or she was going to kill herself and the kids.
No, she was going to kill just herself. And they say that, like Alyson says in her dialogue, that she's like, oh, she was going to kill just herself and nobody else.
Yeah, but if you chose Alyson's version, she was still going to kill herself either way. But Alyson's memory was that she was going to kill the kids and then herself.
Oh, I didn't see that. Okay.
That's the reverse. Yeah. You didn't choose.
Yeah. So either way, she was going to kill herself. But if you chose Alyson's version, the story would be that she was going to kill the kids and then herself.
And just to clarify one point, doesn't she say I might be butchering this now because I might be confusing myself, but doesn't Marianne say, I'm going to kill him or I'm going to kill you? She says, I'm going to kill you. Like, where?
Yes.
So
she says, I'm going to kill you when Tom visits a random night that the kids observe, because that's the ending scene in chapter 2 where the kids are spying on Marianne at the dock, and Tom has come up to the dock on his boat, and they're talking about the fact that those are his kids, and she's like, you need to leave here right now, I'm going to kill you.
But what about the night of her death? Doesn't she directly say that as well? And so Tyler believes it's directed towards him.
Well, when you choose Tom's version, what she says is, honey, I'm not going to hurt you. And Alyson and I think they both had mixed up in their memories what she said to Tom when they were spying on her versus what had actually happened that night, as kind of a way that trauma affects your memories and all that kind of deal. Was how I took it, at least.
I wondered if she was planning on potentially killing Tom or someone else as a way to kind of get out of the situation.
I find one interesting note, though, is between the end of 2 and the end of 3, Alyson was more resistant on reliving the Tom Marianne night when they confronted each other, and she backed away more in joining hands and joining memories. And then after she confessed to Eddie and some of her stranger visions went away, it was almost like when she started getting the relief of the guilt, she was more open to connecting with Tyler. And at the very end of 3, it was almost like she had almost, more of a superpower, like, I'm resolved just to resolve this. And she became a much stronger character at that point, and you saw her openness to be able to see it both ways and push past the fact that maybe I killed my mom and I overreacted, but I'm just a kid. And that's a very hard thing to realize, that maybe I shouldn't have stabbed my mom. That it's not my fault because of circumstances, but that's a very powerful deal, because Marianne was battling the battle of 2 people with Tessa. You got to also frame the fact that she was fighting CPS and fighting Tessa and Tom had threatened her, just a night or 2 before. And then you had all these different layers, and the fact that my kid's trans, I'm trying to figure that out, and I'm broke, and I'm at wit's end. There was a lot of dynamics going on, and the kids knew that too. And I think there was a lot of damage that got unresolved, and that's what spun everybody's memories out a little bit till the very end. Till I think when she got that weight lifted off, because they illustrated it a little bit different, a little bit more powerful. Like it was almost like she was able to connect once and for all, and really see it as it was instead of what she hoped it wasn't.
Yeah, no. Absolutely. And I think we had that kind of final moment there as well. I believe it was right after that where they kind of choose whether to kind of keep the voice between them or not.
Right.
Which I can see right here that 94% of players chose to hold on to the voice. So I think that was probably one of the most overwhelming things that players seem to have chosen to do. Any thoughts about that before we move to the last scene when they're leaving the home for good?
I kind of want to bring back I want to bring back how the story kind of got jumbled, okay? And I'm going to use this analogy. I don't know if anyone's seen the musical Fun Home, but it follows a lesbian cartoonist named Alyson, ironically, who is going through the last moments before her father's death.
Sorry, Keelan, one second. Jenny, I think we're getting a little feedback on your microphone, if you don't mind, just for this part. Appreciate it.
Oopsies.
Keelan.
Anyway, in the musical Fun Home, she's recalling the moments through her father's death because her father killed himself by running in front of a truck. It's a very, very tragic musical. And she's drawing about it because she's a cartoonist and she's drawing it in this graphic novel. But there are sections where she's like, maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I don't really know. And I feel like there's a situation that can tie into this story because memory is not 100% accurate.
Mm-hmm.
Ever. You can never, ever truly say you can 100% remember everything, even if you have an eidetic memory. So when you go through memories that were 10 years ago, there are a lot of things that could have happened, a lot of things that could have been misconstrued. It's like a game of telephone. The more you think about it, the less you remember.
Yeah.
So when you get to that scene, I chose Tom's version because of that specific notion.
Yeah.
And also because you got to use the voice, and Tyler and Alyson told each other that no matter what decision they make, they're still going to be together, which I thought was just lovely because I did not want to have to choose between the two. But I chose Tom's version because I felt for Mary Ann. And I chose Tom's version because I truly think that Mary Ann would not have killed young Tyler for being trans after reading through everything she went through. She wasn't afraid of her child being transgender. She wasn't going to kill her child because she'd already lost one already. Yeah. And she had to deal more with the guilt of losing a child already, that she did not want to lose her other one. She cared about her kids so much, and she loved them to the point where she would do anything for them, such as kill Tom Vecchi, as she threatened to do.
Was she a bad mom?
No.
Was she a good mom? I mean, again, it's a simple question. I know that there's not a simple answer to this, but I just think, going back to chapter 1, it almost portrays her potentially as a transphobic individual that could be abusive towards her children. We know they grew up in an environment that they didn't have much food. They didn't have many kind of trappings of modern life, so to speak. But again, I don't know if it's because it wasn't depicted enough in chapters 2 and 3, but I didn't really get the sense that she was an abusive parent, more so a parent that didn't have enough resources to provide. So that's why I was really surprised still that the kids still look on her as Mary Ann, not mother, that moment, that day was like a clean breakaway, that they don't see her for all of the nurturing attempts to make life something for them considering the environment. That part still kind of surprises me, and that's why I wonder if I either missed something or there was more that simply wasn't depicted as strongly.
Well, I think there are a few comments throughout, especially when they have memories as a kid, the last few months before, that night, that True. She was kind of having a breakdown, and I think she was taking it out on the kids a lot. And I mean, they may have come to this revelation, but I don't think that that's going to automatically absolve all of the feelings that have been built up from the preconceived notions that they had before. There's definitely going to take some time to readjust their view of her. even after getting this information.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go to the house scene so we can close it up here. So the last thing is, after you have this conclusion, you solve essentially all the big kind of lurking questions. You have this final moment as Tyler going to the home, alone as Tyler, at least in my version, if I'm saying this correctly, and you're closing up the house for good. So it's a last moment to see the house unfurnished, pick up a few final belongings, figure out some loose plot threads, and then close the game out. Any last thoughts about that?
I think it was a great transition out of the game and how they ended it. And I think, too, I mean, this is now 6 months in the future, and it talks about when we first meet these two characters, the voice kind of seems like it has a distance thing on it. Like they only ever use it when they're literally right next to each other. And now they can use the voice with Alyson being all the way in Juneau and Tyler still being here. So we see that their bond has developed a lot more. And it seems like, you know, again, it's a story of reconciliation. And now that these two individuals have reconciled with their past and all of that, I mean, you know, they're totally fine with now leaving all this stuff behind. And then seeing how everybody else's story in the town kind of was tied up as well, with Tessa leaving to Manila on a religious mission, and Tom losing the election. And that headline was just so off. Like I could picture that CNN article, that headline. They like hit it so well.
Yeah.
Benny
Vidi. Yeah,
just perfect. And even Sam, you know, seeing that conclusion to that storyline as well. I mean, again, just the way that DONTNOD was able to build this game out, the way that how they concluded the game, developed these characters. I mean, it's a masterclass. I mean, you know, these games are so rare. And honestly, I mean, I don't think we're going to see a studio come anywhere close. I mean, this rivals a lot of the Telltale stuff, even Telltale The Walking Dead, which I think is one of the most fantastic, and just set the bar for games like this. I mean, I think this rivals that 100%.
I agree. Totally. I think this is an amazing work, and I'm glad we got to dedicate so much time to discussing this. Jenny, you have some thoughts about the final scene?
Yeah, I actually watched both the final scene and the alternate ending, and it was fascinating how different the endings were. It has Alyson staying in the house. They keep the house. They don't sell the house. Tyler moves to Juneau to live with Michael, and she's going to make a life there in Delios. And she's kind of pursuing some artistic endeavors and doing some writing. And some of the endings are still the same, like for Sam and for Tom and all that. But the big difference is that basically Michael and Tyler become a couple.
Interesting.
And I've got an apartment in Juneau, and
how many people got that ending?
And Alyson ends up using the master bedroom. She ended up living in Marianne's old bedroom, and made the kids' bedroom upstairs kind of a studio, artist loft, creative space. And so it was a very fast. I watched both of them. I watched the regular ending, and then there was an option on YouTube to watch the alternate. They called it an alternate ending. It's about 20 minutes long, and it was kind of cool because it really changes the perspective of all three chapters a little bit.
Yeah.
On how you view how I viewed Alyson changed by watching that second ending. I will tell you that.
And is that based on? Did you get that second ending based on the decision you make, the final decision you make about what happened that night, or more than likely it might be a series of events that kind of led to that?
I only played the first chapter, and then I streamed on YouTube. Chapters 2 and 3.
Gotcha.
And so, but their choices were consistent with what the choices y'all predominantly made, which were the popular choices.
Yeah.
And this guy also played a bunch of the choices too. So it was like about 6 hours of viewing, 6 or 7 hours of viewing, And then there was another streamer that did an alternate ending to show that final choice that got Alyson to stay in Delios. And I don't know how they did it or how they got there, but it was a very fascinating 20 minutes of how different the story ended. And I just thought it was interesting that Alice ended up staying in the house and keeping the house and making a life in a place that she was trying to get out of just 2 chapters ago. So.
That's the interesting thing about these games, though, too, is that, to Jenny's point, I mean, these games offer you the illusion of choice because there's only so many things that can change, and things that you think that are making that final decision in chapter 1. Basically, what that final, those 2 endings are only made from that final decision, whether you keep the voice or you lose the voice, and that dictates what ending you get.
Interesting. Okay.
So that's why I don't think anybody on this call got the alternate ending, because it's like 94% of people chose you keep the voice. So the majority of us got that better ending.
You are right, because she's texting Tyler instead of using the voice at the end of the alternate ending. So she's texting, taking some pictures. He sends a few texts back. They show the text backs that he sends. And that was, but they didn't use their telepathy in the alternate ending.
Okay, interesting. So that as you said, Johnny, that was the primary split there, which is a little bit strange for that split to be the split that seems, of all the decisions, the most one-sided, where it's 94% of players took one direction, while many of the other decisions are more in the 50-60 range. So that is very fascinating. Yeah, any last overall thoughts about the game and the series? I know, Johnny, you said how much of a masterpiece you felt it was. Will you all be recommending this to other players? Are you looking forward to the next stuff from DONTNOD? I have a feeling we're all just going to be giving this thumbs up. It sounds like everybody's in agreement that this was a really fantastic game to play, to discuss. Yeah, I think that's kind of like the big takeaway from this. If you're not playing this game and checking it out, you should. We have Grizzly Bear saying this game is amazing. I felt an emotional attachment with this game than any other game I've played. And then Darts of Bulba says, my guess is if you avoid the conflict and just pass the big choices, she could probably stay. Okay, so that's Darts of Bulba's thoughts on that specific piece there. We also see, by the way, a little Master Chief bobblehead, if you noticed, in Tyler's car. A little shout out to publisher Microsoft Xbox Game Studios right there. Awesome. Well, I know I've held you hostage way too long, and I appreciate you all, having such an awesome discussion and bringing your A game. Let's clap it up for our guest here, everyone. Thank you so much. You guys have been amazing. This was a lot of fun. We appreciate all of you watching, whether it's on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch, submitting your comments and feedback. We'll continue having these great community conversations on a wide variety of topics, so please stay tuned to that. Again, make sure to follow all the organizations that we partnered with to have this conversation. Charlotte Gaymers Network, Athena Alliance, PvP Hub Charlotte, all 3 amazing organizations. All of these organizations can be found on Facebook, Instagram. What else is Gamers Network on? Now it's on Twitch. Discord, of course. Join the Discord for sure. So make sure you jump on those right now and support these amazing groups doing big things in our community.
Thank you so much, Mike. Appreciate you, brother.
Thank you so much. Cool. I'm going to close this off by going over here, but love you all. Appreciate it so much. And we're going to talk about our upcoming events. Thank you all.
Thank you, Michael.
See ya.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us for this community conversation. We really appreciate it. If you want to check out some of the other conversations we have had in the past, you can start by looking at our archive on YouTube and Facebook. You can notice that in August, when we started this, we started with Black Voices in Gaming. I should say all these conversations are sponsored by our good friends at Lowe's. We really appreciate their support. They support these types of discussions, and we know you do too. So we want to really thank them for making this possible. We also want to thank, again, all of our viewers and everyone who participated in the chat. Thanks so much, Shuma Gosnick, Grizzly Bear, Darth Sabulba. I read your comments here. Darth Sabulba saying, great show, everyone. Wiz Khalifa 212 saying, everyone was was so amazing. Loved watching this discussion. Shuma Gosnix, hopefully I'm saying that correctly. I'm sure I'm butchering it. Saying great discussion. Grizzly Bear sending the hearts. Thank you all so much. We really appreciate that. If you want to check out some of our other conversations outside of, let me scroll on over here, we also had Women in Gaming with the wonderful folks at the Athena Alliance, CLT. Again, this is all available on Facebook and YouTube. Custom game controllers, where we explored how members of the community are building custom game controllers, modding controllers. This was a great exploration of the art, technology, and personalities behind these things. And we also want to give a shout out to our sponsor for that, Lowe's, as well as Red Bull, who came in and gave away a arcade stick. Games to the Rescue was an opportunity to explore how games are being used to fight against coronavirus, and Black Voices in Esports was a great conversation that I'm glad we finally got to get on the record. We've been talking about this for a while, and I'm glad you can catch that on Facebook and YouTube. Of course, we just had LGBT Voices in Gaming Part 1 and Part 2. October, we have a lot of other events planned, including Hispanic Voices in Gaming with board game designer Julio E. Nazario, who's based out of North Carolina. We're looking forward to talking about his games, including the one you see there in the background, Control, spelled CTRL, is available at Target right now. Make sure to check it out. Of course, we also have Indie Game Club. So if you enjoyed this type of in-depth conversation that we had today, I encourage you to definitely check us out for Indie Game Club. Every Monday, we stream ourselves playing games, and on Thursday, we have a panel just like we did today discussing them. This week, we're trying it a little differently. We're actually going to be streaming during the daytime tomorrow, but we will always be having the discussions on Thursday. So if you enjoy what you saw today, jump on that, please. It's always a good time. Of course, outside of talking about games, we love playing them, so please join us for online game nights. These occur every Wednesday and Saturday in our Discord. Check out the event description, or the stream description for more information to jump onto our Discord. It's a great way to play video games and board games with a really welcoming community. We also have an online league for Smash Brothers. It's completely free. It's created and designed with all skill levels and all ages in mind. So whether you've played Smash Brothers once or never before, or whether you're like a state level champion, this league is for you. Tomorrow we will be having the Smash and Learn sessions where you can learn more about Bowser. And then on Friday, we've been having our King of the Ring sessions, which we've been switching up with Queen of the Ring, Team of the Ring, and now this is Dark Lord of the Ring. Dominate the ring in this 1v3 online battle arena special event. Super excited about that. This Saturday is our gold tier tournament for our gold ranked players. And this past Saturday, we had a tournament for silver and bronze. Congratulations for all of the participants in the silver tournament. Congratulations especially goes to first place Carbon Copy, second place K-Stand, and third place Ultimate Forsaken. And for the bronze tier tournament, we want to congratulate first place Scion, second place Waj123, and third place My Drum Luck 87. So hopefully you are excited about all of these events. We know we have a great time with this and hope you do as well. Before we go, folks, we want to continue rating other folks that we follow in the community. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, give me just a moment here that we have. Yes, okay. There's another streamer that checks out a lot of independent games, similar to what we do with Indie Game Club. Why don't we send him some love by rating his channel? So if you just stay here for a moment. Sorry, folks, give me 1 second. I think we're getting a little, we're freezing up a bit here. Of course, right when we want to raid is when we get these issues. So give me 1 moment here as we close up. We'd like to do this because we think it's a lot of fun to send some love to other streamers who are doing things right now. So let me reopen this one more time and give this a shot on Twitch. Okay, I think we are almost back up. And as we always do, let's make sure to always show some love to all of those that we raid. So right now, we are going to be raiding Dirigitive's channel. All right, here we go.